Chapter 223. Gu Fei actually received the challenge letter that he had been dreaming of. His heart was filled with excitement. In short, it was the complete opposite of the disappointment that Butterfly felt when they lost their monthly votes at the last minute last night. Gu Fei looked at the three big words, challenge letter, on the envelope and quickly found the name of the other party, Feng Xing. Immediately, Gu Fei tore open the envelope and took out the letter. The content of the letter was simple and to the point, one-on-one, do you dare? Gu Fei's blood was boiling. He immediately opened the friend button and tried to add Feng Xing as a friend. However, he received a message that the friend button was not turned on. If the guild leaders knew that there was such a cheap way to add Gu Fei as a friend, who knew how much blood they would vomit? Seeing that the private chat could not be carried out, Gu Fei immediately took out the pen and paper that he did not finish writing the reply letter and wrote a simple and to the point, I dare. After throwing the letter into the mailbox, Gu Fei began to chant around the mailbox in anticipation, hurry up and reply, hurry up and reply. After a few minutes, the system chimed. Gu Fei did not even look at the mailbox and opened it. As expected, it was a reply from Feng Xing, time and place. Now you choose the place. Gu Fei quickly replied. The time and place were decided by both parties. This was to show fairness. Gu Fei did everything according to the basic rules. Combat arena. This time, Feng Xing was right next to the mailbox and replied quickly. After replying, he anxiously waited for Gu Fei's reply. Gu Fei's reply was naturally fast. How do I go? 50 meters east of the combat arena. Feng Xing's reply was even faster. The two seemed to be competing. Be there or be square. Be there or be square. Gu Fei, who was about to go offline, immediately turned around and walked towards the combat arena. Time to go offline after the fight. His plan was going according to plan. As for Feng Xing, he looked as if he was facing a formidable enemy. By now, the legends about this magician had spread far and wide. Many people in the guild had even fought against him, and the stories they told about him were all over the place. However, Feng Xing still managed to catch three important points: close combat, instant kill, and teleportation. Feng Xing believed that these were undoubtedly the three most terrifying aspects of this magus. Close quarters combat meant that he would be able to surprise everyone. Instant kill meant that you could not afford to make a single mistake. Teleportation meant absolute speed. When these three keywords were put together, it could be summed up in one sentence: teleport to your side and instantly kill. Ordinary people would probably want to give up after hearing such a way of fighting, but Feng Xing wasn't afraid, because in his eyes, all magicians had a fatal flaw: they had to incant their spells. This flaw meant that when fighting against a mage, the key was to keep an eye on his mouth. If you stared at the mage's mouth, then you had already reached the realm of anticipating the enemy's moves. What happens next will depend on your reaction. This principle had already been seen through by many people, so the mages had also developed corresponding countermeasures. In a real fight, there were very few mages who would incant loudly. Most mages would put the incantation in the corner of their mouth and incanted quietly. Except for the mage and the system, no one could hear them. Feng Xing was an exception. He had a skill in life that most people didn't have, and that was, he knew how to read lips. In other words, he was a legendary lip-reading expert. Translating the opponent's words through lip-reading might not be a guaranteed success, but it wasn't difficult to translate a mage's incantation, because the incantation of a mage only had a few sentences. Because Gu Fei had a special teleportation skill, Feng Xing specially searched for the incantation of this skill, understood the content of the incantation, and then mimicked the incantation. For an expert like him, it was really not a difficult thing. In addition, it seemed to be active, but it sounded a bit passive. Feng Xing seemed to have grasped the opponent's attacking method, so compared to those who relied on listening, he would have a slight advantage. Although it was only a slight advantage, there was a saying that in a fight between masters, life and death was often decided by a thin line. This little bit made Feng Xing feel 100 times more confident. Up until now, he had never lost a match against a mage. At this time, facing a mage who could kill a mage in a second, he was not afraid at all. Unsworn Sword and Reflection of Years decided to find a chance to set up a trap to make Qianli and the other masters of the child elite group suffer together. Feng Xing did not oppose this plan. However, as early as the non-smiler incident, he had already wanted to fight this guy to vent his anger, but unfortunately he did not know the opponent's real identity. After so much time had passed, this emotion had already been diluted, but after today's incident, Feng Xing's already dimmed impulse was once again ignited. The only difference was, this time, Gu Fei's identity was exposed, so Feng Xing did not hesitate to privately issue a challenge to Gu Fei. The arena was not a place with any special purpose, it was just a backdrop built to cater to the environment of the nearby combat dojo. Such a useless place, naturally, no players would come to it. Gu Fei hurried over and saw a Grandmaster of Combat standing straight in the middle of the arena with his arms crossed. Gu Fei guessed that this person was without a doubt Feng Xing, and was instantly overjoyed. He could not recognize this person, one of the 3 core members of the Unhindered 4Cs, but seeing that the other was a Grandmaster of Combat, he immediately liked him. On the way here, Gu Fei had been trying to guess the identity of the other party's class. Speaking of which, he felt that the other party was more likely to be a mage. Because in the parallel world, there was still a class restriction between individual soldiers, and could be said to be an absolutely fair duel, usually between people of the same class. If you, an archer, went to challenge a mage to a duel, probably no one in the entire game except for Gu Fei would pay attention to you. "Hey Feng Xing!" Gu Fei called out to Feng Xing as he climbed up the arena's high platform. Feng Xing nodded with a cold expression. Qianli's drunk. Just like how Gu Fei could not recognize him even though they had met before, Feng Xing could not recognize Gu Fei as the guy who had poked him with a stick. On the other side, Gu Fei had already nodded and admitted his identity. "Can we start now? I won't show any mercy. The same goes for you." Feng Xing's goal was to kill Gu Fei. That's for the best. Gu Fei was also annoyed by the stop duel. That was because it was actually more difficult than directly killing the opponent. Gu Fei was not afraid of hard work. What he was afraid of was that the stop would cause the opponent to be unable to use his full strength. After saying that, the two of them had already started fighting. Feng Xing stared at Gu Fei's mouth, while Gu Fei paid attention to his opponent's shoulders, arms, legs, and all other movable joints. "Come on." Both of them opened their mouths with this subtext. Teleportation, teleportation, teleportation. Feng Xing stared at Gu Fei's mouth, waiting for him to say these 4 words. Perhaps he didn't need to say these 4 words at all. As long as he said the word, teleportation, he could already make a judgment. He would not choose to retreat, instead he would launch a counterattack as soon as possible. Teleportation? Ha! Teleporting to my side and being hit by me, that's equal to teleportation. Feng Xing was proud of himself. Feng Xing had been thinking about how to deal with Gu Fei's powerful move, but he had neglected a basic fact. Even if it was a powerful move, he would only use it when he needed it. The main purpose of Gu Fei learning teleportation was to chase after those who were faster than him. At the moment, Feng Xing hadn't shown that he was faster than Gu Fei, neither was he running away. Feng Xing hadn't triggered the condition of activating Gu Fei's teleportation. Therefore, his waiting would only be in vain. However, Gu Fei also wanted to see Feng Xing's moves first. Therefore, he was waiting for Feng Xing to make the first move. One of them stared at Feng Xing's mouth, while the other stared at Feng Xing's joints. Both of them had the same purpose. They wanted to see through each other's moves. Sadly, neither of them made the first move. Therefore, they just stared at each other for 5 minutes. "Why don't you make the first move?" asked Gu Fei abruptly. Once Ji Hao said this, Feng Xing immediately took a step aside, while swinging his fist horizontally. However, he abruptly stopped halfway. "Ah, you just made the first move like this?" Gu Fei couldn't believe what he had just seen, staring at Feng Xing in a daze. Feng Xing turned his face away. At this moment, his face was as red as a persimmon. If he wasn't careful enough, his face might be punctured. Feng Xing was way too nervous and focused. He had been staring at Gu Fei's mouth, waiting for Gu Fei's teleportation, and waiting for Gu Fei to make the first move. These thoughts flashed across Feng Xing's mind. Unconsciously, he had already come to a conclusion: if Gu Fei moves his mouth, I'll make the first move. Therefore, just now, once Gu Fei opened his mouth, Feng Xing had already swung his fist without even thinking. Before the fist was swung out, Feng Xing realized that Gu Fei had indeed opened his mouth, but it wasn't a teleportation spell. He had been too focused. Feng Xing was so ashamed that he didn't even turn his head around for a long while. No matter how experienced Gu Fei was, he couldn't figure out what exactly Feng Xing's punch meant. At this moment, Feng Xing had already turned around and ignored him. Helplessly, Ji Hao asked, "Are you going to fight or not?" "Fight? Why don't you fight?" Feng Xing angrily turned around and threw a heavy punch towards Gu Fei. Galloping horse. Is this the same move? Seeing this, Gu Fei wanted to move aside, but unexpectedly, Feng Xing abruptly stopped galloping. Feng Xing twisted his body and clasped his hands towards Gu Fei. This was a move that Feng Xing thought he would definitely win, but unexpectedly he missed. Teleportation. Thinking about this, Feng Xing abruptly raised his head and saw Gu Fei standing beside him with a smile. Gu Fei reached out his hand and pushed Feng Xing, who was still twisting in the air, immediately lost his balance and fell to the ground. Gu Fei had already stepped aside immediately. Seeing Feng Xing still lying on the ground in a daze, Gu Fei slightly sighed. Gu Fei was indeed a mage, but in the parallel world, the one he understood the most was a fighter. His understanding came from his private research. Gu Fei was completely familiar with the few skills of a fighter, how to combine them, and how to use them in different ways. These fighting styles invented by players were all within the scope of Gu Fei's knowledge. It was really too difficult for a fighter to defeat Gu Fei. This was because he was facing a true grandmaster of combat. Chapter 224. In Gu Fei's mind, he already had a few plans that could combine all the skills of a fighter, and what Feng Xing had just used was only one of those plans. Judging from Feng Xing's look, he seemed to only be familiar with this one plan. Such a simple fighting style was enough to deal with ordinary players, but when facing a fighting expert like Gu Fei, Feng Xing had already figured out a few plans. Just now, when he pushed Feng Xing down, Gu Fei had even dodged aside, in case that Feng Xing might launch a sweeping kick towards him. As a result, Feng Xing just lied on the ground. This was the reason why Gu Fei sighed. Of course, Feng Xing didn't suffer any harm from lying on the ground. He only suffered a psychological injury that all people who were bullied by Gu Fei would have. Feng Xing paused for a second, then hurriedly stood up from the ground, staring at Gu Fei. Seeing him stand up, Gu Fei suddenly launched an attack. Ji Hao slightly drew his arms in front of his body, then leaned his body forward, forming a sharp angle with the ground. He then raised his right hand and threw a punch towards Feng Xing's chest. This is galloping horse? Feng Xing was shocked. If this was a normal fight, Feng Xing would definitely launch a counterattack with the move of galloping horse shooting star, and let the system judge whose fist was tougher. However, today he was stunned, because a galloping horse was launched by a magician. This was definitely a supernatural event. Skills of different professions could never be used in the same way, even with scrolls, skills, weapons, etc. This supernatural event made Feng Xing forget how to deal with it, until Gu Fei had already attacked in front of him. Among the group of players, Feng Xing was an experienced fighter. As an experienced fighter, he surely had his own way to deal with galloping horse. At this moment, it was already too late for Feng Xing to dodge. Feng Xing didn't dodge at all. Instead, he rushed forward. Gu Fei's punch landed right on Feng Xing's chest. Meanwhile, Feng Xing's hands had already reached towards Gu Fei's shoulders. This was a gamble, because the galloping horse art had a chance to cause a stunning effect. Once the galloping horse art triggered the stunning effect, Feng Xing's counterattack would stop. For an expert grandmaster of combat, a single stun could lead to a series of consecutive attacks. This was also the reason why many fighters preferred galloping horse as their first move. However, speaking of the probability, the chance of stunning was much lower than that of charge. It was only 10%, and the proficiency of the skill didn't increase the chance significantly. Therefore, Feng Xing believed that he had a high chance of winning this gamble. In fact, he had a 100% chance of winning. How could Gu Fei have any galloping horse skill? All he did was use the stance of a horse galloping a meteor to throw a punch. As a result, Gu Fei's punch landed right on Feng Xing's chest. Feng Xing didn't dodge at all. Instead, both of his hands reached towards Gu Fei's chest. He didn't know how many times he had suffered like this in the game. This was unique to online players. In Gu Fei's eyes, it was like a scoundrel's playstyle, and it had repeatedly caused him to lose his temper. Gu Fei's punch didn't cause any damage, nor could it cause any stunning effect. However, his shoulders were already firmly held in Feng Xing's hands. Feng Xing didn't have the time to think. He threw his arms and performed the level 30 fighter skill, Hug Throw. The biggest feature of fighter skills was that they could be activated quickly and had a short cooldown time. They focused more on spirit, in order to improve these two features to the extreme. At this moment, Feng Xing's Hug Throw had finished its cooldown time. He threw Gu Fei out with his arms. Looking at how he did not suffer any damage from Gu Fei's punch, he realized that Gu Fei's galloping horse shooting star was just an act. Feng Xing gave a resonant growl, then launched a real, galloping horse-like shooting star and chased up. Before Gu Fei's body landed on the ground, he was forcibly frozen by the system. He could only watch Feng Xing's punch land on his body, but he couldn't do anything. A throw and a dash. This was a simple combo often used by fighters in the early stages of the game. However, at this stage, it wasn't easy to kill the enemy with this simple combo. As for whether this combo could be followed up or not, it would depend on whether this galloping horse could cause a stunning effect. This simple skill had a 10% chance of stunning, but Feng Xing knew that stunning was very useful for fighters. Therefore, he put all his equipment to increase the chance of this special effect. All of Feng Xing's equipment, accessories. All of Feng Xing's equipment could raise the dizziness rate of this gallop shooting star to 34%. For a Grandmaster of Combat, this was already a rare and precious data. Fortunately, Feng Xing put all his effort into this special effect, so his attack damage wasn't that high. If he were a fighter with a full set of equipment to enhance his attack, a Hug Throw and galloping horse would be enough to cripple Gu Fei. At this moment, Gu Fei was blown away by Feng Xing's punch. He fell on the ground and continued to slide. Feng Xing complained in his heart. He regretted using too much strength in this punch. The duration of stunning was very limited. If he wasted too much time, the effect would have disappeared by the time he rushed to the front. At this moment, Feng Xing's biggest wish was to have a teleportation skill as well. As Gu Fei was sliding on the ground, Feng Xing seized the time to chase after him. However, after a few steps, Gu Fei suddenly fell to the edge of the arena and fell down. Alas! Feng Xing sighed deeply. He didn't even react when he fell down. Feng Xing knew that he had successfully triggered the stunning effect. Unfortunately, his punch was so heavy that it directly knocked him off the arena. However, both of them were fighting for their lives. Being knocked off the arena obviously wouldn't mean anything. Feng Xing quickly rushed to the edge of the arena, jumped up and then fell down. This was also a fighter's skill, level 36 Flying Swallow Cut. It was originally a move of jumping up and stretching one's leg downwards to attack. However, it was very difficult to use this move in a combo attack. Therefore, many smart players began to use this move to attack the opponent who had fallen on the ground. After using it so many times, even the name was changed. It was no longer called Flying Swallow Cut, but Flying Swallow Fall. Putting the opponent on the ground with a series of combo attacks, then sending him back to the respawn point with a Flying Swallow Fall. This was the favorite fighting style of fighters nowadays. Feng Xing didn't want to use this move to look cool. He was flying down from the arena, so this move was indeed the most suitable one. He didn't expect that his body would fly out and his leg would be straightened, but when he looked down, no one was there. Before Feng Xing could think about it, his back was hit heavily again. Feng Xing immediately lost his balance. He flipped in the air while still in the posture of Flying Swallow Fall, then fell on the ground sideways, looking very embarrassed. Feng Xing raised his head and saw that on the edge of the arena, Gu Fei was taking back his leg. Gu Fei shook his head and said, "You can't do it." Teleportation. Feng Xing said angrily. No matter how hard he tried, he still forgot to defend at this critical moment. Gu Fei seized the opportunity and flashed behind him, then effortlessly kicked him to the ground. "Alright, I'm leaving." Gu Fei waved his hand at him. "What? Stuff?" Feng Xing leaped up from the ground and quickly climbed up. Although he fell twice for no reason and looked a bit embarrassed, from the perspective of the game, Gu Fei had taken 2 attacks from him, so he must not have much health left. Feng Xing, on the other hand, was not injured at all, so he had the upper hand. Not to mention that Gu Fei had just used his teleportation skill, which must be on cooldown right now. How could he miss such an opportunity? Thinking about this, Feng Xing didn't waste any more time to give Gu Fei time to recover his teleportation skill. Instead, he raised his hand and launched a punch towards Gu Fei, using the most basic skill of all fighters, heavy punch. Gu Fei slightly leaned his body to dodge the punch, while his punch had already risen from his side like a lightning bolt, hitting right on Feng Xing's chin. Under Feng Xing's stunned gaze, Gu Fei launched another flick kick from his shoulder, followed by which, Gu Fei leaped up, raised his leg and swung it down towards Feng Xing's face. The dust under Gu Fei's shoe blew onto Feng Xing's face. After landing on the ground, Gu Fei reached out his hands and grabbed Feng Xing's waist, then shook his head and sighed, "I can't throw you." After that, he slightly let go of Feng Xing's hands, flicked the dust off Feng Xing's shoulder and asked, "Is that what you mean?" Feng Xing couldn't say a word. What Gu Fei had just shown were the skills of fighters: uppercut, bouncing kick, flying swallow cut, body throw. Just like the galloping horse shooting star that Feng Xing had used before, these attacks were all superficial, without any corresponding damage. However, these attacks were all launched in one go, which was far more powerful than any other fighter that Feng Xing had ever seen. Uppercut, bouncing kick, and then flying swallow cut to cut the opponent down from the air. This was the dream of countless fighters, but none of them could achieve it. As for Gu Fei, although his uppercut and bouncing kick couldn't knock the opponent into the air, Feng Xing was sure that if Gu Fei truly had these skills, he would definitely be able to follow up that flying swallow cut. After that, Gu Fei would perform the galloping horse shooting skill. If all these skills were used together, the damage would definitely be great. How did you do it?" Feng Xing asked. "Rhythm, pay attention to the rhythm has to be faster." Gu Fei said to him. "Rhythm?" Feng Xing was confused. Gu Fei thought for a while, then decided to change a way that people like them could easily understand. "Pay attention to cancel skills." Oh! Feng Xing was instantly enlightened. The timing of cancel skills determines whether the final combo can be completed smoothly or not. You need to practice more. Gu Fei said seriously. Feng Xing nodded confusedly. What was this? Was a magician teaching a fighter how to use skills to complete combo attacks? "Keep practicing," Gu Fei said to him, then walked away while patting his clothes. Just now, Gu Fei had slid on the ground and fell down from the stage. His body was covered in dust as well. Black loves to be stained with dust. Feng Xing faintly heard Gu Fei sighing. Chapter 225. Gu Fei went offline with a deep sigh. The opportunity to fight against a Grandmaster of Combat was hard to come by, but for Gu Fei, defeating a Grandmaster of Combat was much easier than defeating other classes. He didn't even draw his sword, but he had already shocked Feng Xing. This was because Gu Fei's level of martial arts was too high. In the parallel world, when designing the Grandmaster of Combat, at most, they could find a few martial arts instructors to study it. But in this aspect, Gu Fei was the top technical talent. Even those instructors were just displaying their slight skill in front of an expert in front of Gu Fei. Now, if they were to apply their little bit of thinking into the game, it wouldn't even be considered as displaying their slight skill in front of an expert. After going offline, Gu Fei went up to the rooftop to practice his boxing. He grabbed a sandbag and used uppercut, bouncing kick, flying swallow slash, hugging throw, galloping meteor. Gu Fei simulated the skills of a Grandmaster of Combat in the game and trampled on the sandbag. How simple! Gu Fei let out a long sigh. Unfortunately, doing this in the game didn't cause him any damage. And when it came to hugging throw, he couldn't continue because he didn't have enough strength. In reality, even a real Grandmaster of Combat didn't have that much strength. It was just that the moment they used the skill hugging throw, they would be possessed by Popeye's soul. In the game, Feng Xing hadn't left the arena yet. Gu Fei was simulating in real life on the rooftop, but he was here experimenting with his skills over and over again. How could it be so easy? Feng Xing sighed. He saw how easy it was for Gu Fei to perform, but when it came to him, he couldn't string it together even when his face turned red. Rhythm. Feng Xing muttered these two words, sweat pouring down like rain in the arena. On the other side, in the Cloud City Forum, Child Elite groups surprised everyone round after round in the matches, so much so that everyone was numb. The Child Elite group's record of victories all the way to the semifinals was extremely valuable. Yunmu and Yun Xiang were two rank 4 mercenaries. The Silver Moon mercenaries were another dark horse that had appeared in the tournament. The Amethyst mercenaries were not eye-catching, but when people found out that they belonged to the Reborn Amethyst, they were immediately looked at in a new light and felt that they were also a dark horse. In addition, the recently defeated 4 Seas mercenary group wasn't as diligent as the Black Hand mercenary group. However, the members of Unhindered 4 Seas could be said to be the cream of the crop in Cloud City. Therefore, in the eyes of many, the 4 Seas mercenary group was the strongest, but in the end, they were also slandered. At this point, the top 4 mercenary groups in Cloud City were born: Child Elite Group, Black Hand Mercenary Group, and Waterflower Mercenary Group under Singing with Wine. There was also a level 4 group called 7 Colored Cloud. The mercenary group's name was extravagant, but in reality, the mercenary group was very ordinary. It was under the banner of the rank 3 guild, among rosy clouds. The mercenary group had reached level 4, but the guild had only reached level 3. This was the guild's most eye-catching achievement. The level 4 group had 80 people, and along the way, they hadn't met any strong groups or dark horse groups. Occasionally, they met a few mediocre level 3 or 4 groups like them, and after a battle where they killed 1,000 enemies and sacrificed 800 of their own, they passed. The outside world didn't pay much attention to 7 Colored Cloud. Their greatest interest was to see how far the 6 people from Child Elite Group could go. After the end of the guild matches, the Child Elite Group's opponents were quickly announced by the system. In the semifinals, Child Elite Group versus Waterflower Mercenary Group, Black Hand Mercenary Group versus 7 Colored Cloud. At this time, Han Family Young Master and Singing with Wine's guild leader, Against the Current, were sitting together in the tavern. So this group was formed by you. I was wondering why you didn't join Waterflower. Against the Current side. Child Elite Group's recent exposure was too high. Even if people couldn't find out the specific members, as long as they went to the mercenary building to search for Child Elite Group, their leader's name would always be there. Normal people didn't know who this person was, but how could Singing with Wine's people not know? His name was also on the guild list. Han Family Young Master only smiled and didn't say anything. So you're saying that you already knew that Mage? Against the Current said. Han Family Young Master didn't deny it. He saw that we searched so hard for him, but he didn't tell us. Against the Current said. He didn't let us. Han Family Young Master easily pushed the responsibility away. Against the Current expressed his understanding and continued. After the competition, bring your friends into our guild. The more the merrier. Han Family Young Master smiled bitterly. Small groups like ours are the most democratic. Don't think that I'm the leader, I'm just a figurehead. We still have to discuss this matter together. Of course, let's meet up for a drink when we're free. Against the Current said. How about after the competition tomorrow? Han Family Young Master would never reject a drink. How are you going to deal with us? Against the Current asked casually. He more or less knew what Han Family Young Master was capable of. I haven't thought about it yet. Han Family Young Master smiled. How many people are you going to send? I haven't thought about it either. Against the Current smiled. Then we'll talk about it when the time comes. Han Family Young Master said. We'll talk about it when the time comes. Against the Current nodded. I'll leave first. You can drink slowly. Then he waved his hand. Little Ray, I'll pay for this table. It's fine. Han family young master said. Don't be so polite. We're all on the same side. Against the Current laughed out loud. Little Ray looked at Han family young master and Han family young master nodded to him. Little Ray immediately took the bill and showed it to Against the Current. The smile on his face couldn't be maintained anymore. You can really drink. Against the Current squeezed out a smile and sighed. Let me do it myself. Han family young master smiled. But Against the Current had already said that he, as a guild leader, couldn't be so tasteless. He immediately took out his wallet and paid for the drinks that cost more than 100 gold coins. 100 gold wasn't a large sum, but this was a matter of one's perception of consumption. If you were to go against the flow and spend this money on useful equipment and items, you wouldn't even blink an eye. Spending it on alcohol would make your heart ache. Don't drink too much. It's bad for your body. Against the Current said with lingering fear and left in a hurry. Actually, drinking in the game wouldn't hurt your body at all. Han family young master calmly took the bill and glanced at it before asking Little Ray, this week's drinks are all included? Little Ray nodded. This is the kind of person you should rely on when looking for a boss. Han family young master recommended to Little Ray. What else could Little Ray say other than smiling? Nothing else was said that night. The next day, Gu Fei went online and went to Little Ray's bar as usual to discuss the situation of this round's match. He was met with an unprecedentedly harmonious scene. In Little Ray's bar, Han family young master and the others didn't sit in the private room because it wasn't only the child elite group that day. Against the Current was also sitting in the bar with his brothers who were drinking and singing. Before the match, the two sides sat together to discuss tactics. It was so harmonious and embarrassing. Gu Fei didn't know what to say for a moment. We meet again. Against the Current looked at Gu Fei with a friendly smile. Come sit. Gu Fei didn't know what he meant. I'm treating everyone to drinks. Against the Current smiled from ear to ear. Didn't you say that we would drink after the match? Han family young master was confused. If we drink now, wouldn't it be better to fight with the alcohol in our bodies? Against the Current said. Han family young master thought for a moment and smiled. You're afraid that I'll have plenty of time after the match and won't be able to stop drinking. Against the Current was quite embarrassed that his thoughts were exposed. Actually, he wasn't a stingy person. It was just that Han family young master's consumption of alcohol was too terrifying. How long had it been since the end of the mercenary competition when they met yesterday? He could only drink so much. If he really kept drinking, Against the Current believed that he had the ability to drink until he went bankrupt. However, it was really too strange for the two sides that were about to compete to drink so harmoniously together before the match. Everyone held the wine glasses that were brought over and didn't know what to say. They could only drink their own in silence. Are you guys our opponents today? Gu Fei asked Against the Current. He only found out about this news at this moment. Against the Current nodded. Your formation is very powerful. Gu Fei said. Against the Current humbly said, not at all, not at all. On the other hand, Gu Fei sent a message. Thin waist. Lend me your anti-magic equipment. I need to fight those guys with the formation again. Not long after, Thin Waist Dance rushed into Little Ray's bar. She was surprised to see the two sides that were about to compete sitting together so harmoniously. Here, here. Gu Fei hurriedly called out. Sister Xiao Shi. Yutian Shenming was even more excited than Gu Fei. Hi Xiao Wu. Unscathed in battle, pretended to be calm as usual. Thin Waist Dance greeted everyone and came to Gu Fei's side. She gave him the equipment and asked, What are you doing? Guild leader Against the Current, please drink. Gu Fei smiled. Against the Current recognized that the person in front of him was the famous Thin Waist Dance. He hurriedly got up to greet her and repeatedly called for Little Ray to serve the wine. At the same time, he guessed, this is the richest person in the game. Does she only see the most expensive wine? Thin Waist Dance was not enthusiastic about wine. Naturally, she would not care about the quality of the wine. She mainly came to deliver the equipment. After handing it to Gu Fei, she said goodbye to everyone and left. Look, a set with 73% anti-magic. Impressive, right? Gu Fei showed it to Against the Current. Impressive. Against the Current responded, but his eyes did not look at the equipment. He looked at Gu Fei as if he was looking at a more powerful creature. Even if the current situation was harmonious, they would have to fight for real later. How could this kind of secret equipment with high anti-magic be shown so easily? This was such a strong confidence. Against the Current side. Butterfly Knot. The match is coming to an end. Please cheer for Gu Fei and his comrades in the elite group. Chapter 226. In the Little Ray's bar, the two groups drank silently in a harmonious atmosphere. Gu Fei was arranging the equipment that Slender Waist Dancer had just sent over, while Countercurrent was calculating in his heart. If it really was like what he said, 73% magic resistance, then that would be too overpowered. Originally, it would only take 3 heavenly fire wheels to eliminate people, but with this equipment, it would take around 11. This requirement was too much. Although the Waterflower mercenary group was under Songs for Wine, the strength of a mercenary group and a guild couldn't be exchanged casually, mainly because of the number of people. Songs for Wine could use more than 100 mages to form a magic circle, but the upper limit of the Waterflower mercenary group was 80 people. It was impossible for all of them to be mages, and a team without class balance would be easily defeated. Therefore, it was really difficult for Songs for Wine's powerful magic circle to be used in a mercenary group. The magic circle itself was already very weak, and now that Gu Fei was wearing equipment with 73% magic resistance, Countercurrent immediately felt that the mages on his side were useless in this match. Looks like I'll have to think about how to fight this match. Countercurrent thought to himself. After sitting quietly for a while, there wasn't much time left until the match. Obviously, everyone had had enough of the atmosphere of reluctantly sitting together and drinking together. Everyone kept looking at the time. One of them whispered, "It's about time, right?" and received a positive response from everyone. Everyone stood up at the same time and said, "See you on the battlefield." Then, with a tacit understanding, the 6 members of the child elite group left the tavern from the left door, while Countercurrent led his brothers out from the right door. Both sides walked through a street and headed towards the teleportation circle. The original pre-battle intelligence meeting had turned into a silent cocktail party because of Countercurrent's unexpected appearance. At this time, they had to make full use of the time on the road. The intelligence on their opponents was personally explained by the Han family young master. After all, he was a member of Songs for Wine, and the members of the mercenary group were all elites of the guild. He actually recognized all of them. Listening to the Han family young master recount the information of the 80 people in a clear and rapid manner, the eyes of the other 4 people except for the sword demon widened. At the end of the story, no one was listening anymore. They were all amazed by the powerful memory of the Han family young master. Usually, Brother Yu has to rely on his little intelligence book for information. It's these 80 people. After saying that, the 6 of them arrived at the teleportation formation. After entering the pre-battle map, Yutian Shinming was still counting with his fingers. Is it 80? Exactly 80? It's 80. Brother Yu nodded in agreement. After all, he had some talent in statistics. In the end, he exclaimed, "It's such a waste of your talent that you don't do intelligence work. Everything will be flawed without me." Han family young master said. Everyone was in no mood to exclaim at his shameless boasting. "Since you know these 80 people so well, then you should be very confident in this match, right?" Brother Yu said. "Well, it's a little useful but not very important." Han family young master said, "I just like to see your eyes full of admiration." "Go fuck yourself." Everyone's eyes were filled with disdain, the most profound disdain. There wasn't much time left. The number of participants in the opponent's Waterflower mercenary group increased rapidly. Not long after, it rose to 72 people and stopped moving. The remaining 8 people seemed to be busy and couldn't come. Not long after, There was a 10-second countdown. The screen changed and the match officially began. Island, right? A few people stretched and asked Han family young master. Han family young master sneered. Many people think they can read my mind, but they're all wrong. We're all wrong too. Please don't mentally attack us anymore. What's your plan? If there's nothing else, I'll just go and kill them. Gu Fei really couldn't take it anymore. Follow me. The young master of the Han clan walked forward. The 5 people looked at each other and followed behind him. Brother Yu tried to find confidence in Sword Demon's face again, but this time he didn't get what he wanted. Sword Demon's face also had a slight trace of doubt. Sword Demon? Brother Yu's voice was a little shaky. Sword Demon recalled. There was once when his intentions were guessed, so he deliberately changed the originally appropriate tactics, in the end, lost. Brother Yu answered. No, he won, but the losses were greater than the original plan. One of the people who died was the guy who saw through his intentions. Sword Demon said, Wow, this guy is too evil. Gu Fei and the others who were eavesdropping on the conversation between Brother Yu and Sword Demon couldn't help but come over to express their opinions. Is he going to send all of us to our deaths? Yutian Shenming said. The law doesn't punish the masses. Didn't everyone just shout? Brother Yu asked. I didn't shout. Sword Demon said. Me neither. Gu Fei said. You're lying. I was right beside you. You clearly shouted. Yutian Shenming pointed at Gu Fei. Calm down, young man. You might be sent to your death by the young master. But if you say I shouted again, you'll die immediately. Gu Fei threatened. I don't want to live anymore. Each one is worse than the other. Yutian Shenming's face was full of tears. The 5 of them didn't say anything else. Under the Han family young master's lead, they arrived at a forest. Han family young master took the lead and entered. After walking for a while, he stopped and turned his head. The sunlight that was scattered by the branches and leaves at the top of the tree fell on his face. In the dark and gloomy forest, his already strange face appeared even more mottled. Han family young master suddenly smiled. The 5 of them felt their blood run cold. Okay, let's go up. Han family young master suddenly said. Go up where? The 5 of them asked in surprise. Up the tree. Han family young master patted the side. Oh, just up the tree? The 5 of them let out a sigh of relief. But then they quickly asked, why do we have to go up the tree? This is a tactic. Han family young master said. Tactic? The 5 of them were confused. All of them were afraid of being played to death by Han family young master's evil tricks. Han family young master set an example. After letting Sword Demon give him a hand, he took the lead to climb up. When he reached the position, he looked around and called out to the others under the tree. Chen Liuden, you 2 go up first. Han family young master said. The 2 of them were shocked. To be honest, when they were stretching and shouting to the top of the mountain, their voices were a bit loud. Yutian Shenming was a teenager. Naturally, he didn't care about the volume of his words. On the other hand, Gu Fei was a teacher. When the teacher taught, he was used to speaking loudly. Is this a trap to take revenge on us? The 2 of them thought at the same time. I don't know how to go up the tree. Yutian Shenming immediately started to escape. Let me help you. Unscathed in battle was gloating. He had already caught Yutian Shenming who was trying to escape. Unscathed in battle, you bastard. Go eat shit. Yutian Shenming cursed. Unscathed in battle ignored him. He found a tree branch and threw Yutian Shenming up. Yutian Shenming didn't see it was high. He wanted to fall down, but Unscathed in battle also stuck his sword under Yutian Shenming's body. Yutian Shenming reacted quickly. Seeing that the situation wasn't right, he immediately grabbed onto the tree branch. Over there. Over there. Han family young master pointed in a direction. Yutian Shenming trembled as he moved on the tree branch. From time to time, he would check if there was any chance for him to fall. No, not at all. Unscathed in battle was on high alert. Gu Fei also joined them. He even sent a message to Yutian Shenming. Let's test him. Don't worry. If anything goes wrong, I'll save you. Yutian Shenming was helpless. He could only cry secretly for making such a bad friend. Under Han family young master's guidance, Yutian Shenming climbed higher and higher. He had already given up on the idea of falling. He started to carefully test if the branch under his feet was loose. He felt that Han family young master's plan was to point at a branch that couldn't bear any weight on purpose and let him stand on it. As it turned out, Han family young master's thoughts weren't that easy to guess. Yutian Shenming arrived at the designated location safe and sound. The message receiving channel immediately exploded with noise. How is it? Is there anything unusual? Gu Fei and the others sent messages to inquire. Using me as a test subject. Yutian Shenming was angry. He didn't reply to any of them. Qianli, you go up too. Go to that location. Han family young master pointed at a location. He then called the other three, come up. Find a place to hide. Unscathed in battle was the strongest. He took on the responsibility of helping. He carried Sword Demon and Brother Yu up the tree one by one. He then looked at Gu Fei. I don't need it. Gu Fei shook his head. He pointed at a branch beside him. Teleportation move. With a swoosh, Gu Fei was already standing on the tree. I know you don't need it. You help me. Unscathed in battle was exasperated. Gu Fei glanced at his burly body. He was expressionless. Do you think that's possible? Unscathed in battle was indeed a difficult problem. Later, they worked together to carry him up the tree. Gu Fei looked at his clumsy posture on the branch and sighed, don't get involved in this. Then, Gu Fei carried the lightened sword demon up the tree. He then teleported and jumped from branch to branch. You can practice more. You'll come in handy later, Han family young master suddenly said. What about now? What should we do? Other than unscathed in battle, the other 5 had chosen their positions on the tree. Brother, you asked. Wait for him to find us. Han family young master smiled faintly. What if he can't find us? He will find us. Even Unchung Mutsu can find us. How can he not? What happens after he finds us? This was the question that everyone was concerned about. This forest is a trap prepared for him. Oh! Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. It turned out that Han family young master had a conscience and did not plot against his own people. This trap was prepared for him to go against the current. Chapter 227. The forest was quiet. The 5 of them silently watched as unscathed in battle moved clumsily on the tree. Most of the settings in the parallel world were very consistent with everyday physics. Therefore, a branch that could support anyone else could be cruelly broken by unscathed in battle. Unscathed in battle fell to the ground. Whether he died or not wasn't important. What everyone was concerned about was that his landing must have caused a huge commotion, so much so that it might attract Upstream's group over. Since it's a trap, why don't we send someone to lure them over? Someone asked the Han family young master. The later they come, the better. The less alert they are, the better. It's best if they think we're not ambushing them, but hiding. Look, that's too obvious, the Han family young master replied. Therefore, the 6 members of the child elite group squatted on the tree and waited quietly. Outside the forest, Upstream was leading the group to search for the 6 members of the child elite group. After inquiring about the information from the defeated mercenary groups, Upstream knew that the most important thing to deal with the child elite group was not to split up their forces. The 6 members of the group were undoubtedly elites, the elites of the elites. There was no accurate measurement of how strong the chemistry would be when they gathered together. Upstream didn't want to measure it with his own mercenary group, so he could only choose to act as one. The 72 members of the mercenary group maintained their formation and searched around the map. 72 people versus 6 people. The size of the map was basically the same as the one where the child elite group fought against the Shepherd Cloud mercenary group. But when Upstream led the 71 members to the highest point on the map and looked around, they didn't find anything. There were trenches, depressions, behind mountains, and forests on the map. These were all blind spots. Upstream had no choice but to leave one member to continue watching from the high ground. The rest of them formed a group and continued searching. Their target was naturally the blind spots that they hadn't seen before. Following the trenches, deep into the depressions, over the mountains, and through the forest. They searched one spot after another, but they still didn't find anything. At this time, 21 minutes had passed in the competition, and there was only a total of 47 minutes. Not being able to find the enemy made going upstream very anxious. He was also one of the people who had been defeated by the kiting tactic, and his defeat was the most exaggerated. More than 600 people had been unable to catch Slim Waist Dance. Therefore, upstream was actually quite wary of kiting. After leaving one person at the highest mountain, he was very worried. Every minute, he would turn around to look over, afraid that the opponent would take down that person and they would lose with a score of 0-1. Fortunately, such a situation did not occur. However, not being able to find an opponent made him flustered. He could guess the opponent's intentions. The kiting tactic had to continue until the end of the match, so the later the battle started, the more advantageous it was. Child Elite Group was deliberately stalling for time. Perhaps in the last 5 seconds, an archer would suddenly appear out of nowhere and instantly kill one of their own. Don't you think it's an injustice to lose like this? This couldn't go on. Going against the current, he understood. But where was he? The members on the high ground were watching closely and confidently said that they did not see any movement of the opponent during the search, which meant that they were indeed not in these hiding places. But other than these places, where could they go? Going against the current hammered their heads. The 71 players of Wildflower Mercenary Group hammered their heads. The wisdom of the people was infinite. What one person couldn't think of, it was impossible for 72 people to think of. One person suddenly shouted, "In the tree, it's in the tree." That's the place we didn't pay much attention to when we were looking around. Everyone immediately reacted. Yes, it was in the tree. There were a total of 5 forests on the map, and any one of them could be where they were hiding. Without further ado, going against the current immediately led his men to search. The 6 mercenaries squatting on the tree had already watched Wildflower Mercenary Group pass under their feet once. Many of them looked up, but it was too casual. In addition, the light in the forest was not good, and when they looked up, they were often dazzled by the sun, so no one noticed the abnormality in the tree. After leaving this time, Han Family Young Master immediately reminded everyone to be vigilant. The next time they come, they will definitely know that we are in the tree. The second wave of search came not long after. Going against the current was also quite lucky. Out of the 5 forests, they only found the second one, and it just so happened that the 6 people from Child Elite Group were hiding in. In the first forest, they had already summed up the search method. As soon as they entered the forest, the archers and mages kept shooting arrows and spells, while the warriors kept hammering the trees around them to create vibrations. The other professions were also completely prepared for battle, ready to pounce on the people who fell from the trees at any time. At this time, Han Family Young Master only sent 2 words in the mercenary channel, "Persevere." At the same time, he privately messaged Gu Fei, "Prepare to attack, OE spells, use 1,000 layers of flames." "Attack where?" Gu Fei asked. "Wherever someone falls, throw the spell there," the Han family's young master said. Gu Fei's heart palpitated. Han Family Young Master really wanted to use his own people as bait. Couldn't he change this habit? However, Han Family Young Master quickly followed up with another message. "Even if I fall, don't be lenient. Don't worry, I'll be even more ruthless," Gu Fei said helplessly. After all, this was an online game, even oneself could be sacrificed. No matter how much criticism this kind of tactic would cause, Gu Fei knew that this guy's heart was definitely very open. This narcissistic guy must be thinking, if even I can sacrifice myself, what's wrong with you guys sacrificing yourself? However, the ways of the world weren't that simple, because in everyone's eyes, the one with the most weight was oneself. If he only sacrificed himself, this kind of action would definitely win him respect. However, if he sacrificed himself while bringing others along with him, it was hard to say if he would be able to gain others' understanding. However, no matter what, Han Family Young Master had already made up his mind to do this. Gu Fei had to admit that this was a vicious yet effective tactic. Persevere. Han family young master only said these 2 words to the others. Gu Fei only felt that if he explained everything, everyone might be able to understand. Why did he have to leave this thorn in their hearts? This Han family young master's personality was truly a bit vile. He was sighing. Then he heard a flutter from a nearby tree. Unscathed in battle, who had struggled to get to this position, was the first to happily fall. Fire 3,000 layers flames. Rise. Gu Fei pointed at unscathed in battle's landing spot and quickly chanted, but he wasn't happy at all. Gu Fei's magic delay had once again become a unique and ingenious technique. Since unscathed in battle had fallen from the tree, Waterflower's people would naturally surround him. If the spell was cast too quickly and exploded before they arrived, it would naturally be a waste. However, with this delay, Waterflower's people had already surrounded unscathed in battle. Boom! The instant the flames sprayed out, Gu Fei saw unscathed in battle fall to the ground. He immediately got up and sent out a whirlwind slash. Although he wasn't really a wretched uncle, he would never willingly give up in a battle. Whirlwind slash, a whirlwind slash that was always ready to be released at any time, was the best proof of this. The flames seemed to burn even faster as the whirlwind slash rose. However, unscathed in battle was mercilessly engulfed by the flames. Waterflower's people were still immersed in the joy of finding their opponent, but very quickly, most of them were burned into white light. However, there were still some who survived. Players were currently level 40, and their equipment was constantly improving. Although Gu Fei was wielding a level 70 night streak, he didn't have any intelligence points, so his magic damage was greatly reduced. Secondly, although the night streak was level 70, it was only at the level of level 60 because it dealt both physical and magic damage. If it wasn't for Gu Fei's Moonlight Soul Robe, which greatly increased his magic damage, he wouldn't even be able to insta-kill low-health professions. In addition, the people from Waterflower Mercenary Group were also the cream of the crop of the big guilds. When this spell was cast, some of them with high health and good equipment, even though their faces were pale with fright, still managed to survive. This included one person, Unscathed in Battle. Unscathed in Battle also hadn't fallen to Gu Fei's area of effect spell, so he didn't give up either. Those who could reach him were all masters with excellent speed. Those who were fast had low health, so they were all instantly killed by Gu Fei. Unscathed in Battle put away his whirlwind slash, roared, and charged at the warrior next to him. The warrior had just taken a spell from Gu Fei, so he didn't have much health left. At this moment, he was still being burned by the flames on the ground, so he hurriedly tried to retreat. Who would have thought that Unscathed in Battle would suddenly put away his whirlwind slash and charge out? He was immediately hit head-on, flying out of the flames with his butt sticking up in the air. Before he could even land, he had already turned into white light. Wushang roared again. He swung his sword and slashed the other survivor into a tree. He did not use any skills in this attack, so the damage was limited. The brat who fell into the tree did not die. He only stared at Wushang, who seemed to have gone berserk, in shock. However, Unscathed in Battle proved that he was still clear-headed. He knew that the flames under his feet still dealt continuous damage. After clearing out the 2 who were blocking his way, he quickly jumped out of the pit of fire. However, the people from Waterflower Mercenary Group had already surrounded him. Unscathed in Battle, who had been hit by Gu Fei's spell, didn't have much health left, but he was still stubbornly resisting. Chance! Han family young master quickly sent a message to Gu Fei. Release another one. Gu Fei already knew this was his intention, so he pointed his sword at him. When he received the message, Gu Fei quickly replied with a single word, "Okay." Skyfall Flaming Wheel. Gu Fei suddenly shouted. Han family young master was so angry that he immediately sent a message, "What are you shouting for?" Gu Fei didn't even have time to reply, because he had already jumped down from the tree after he said that. Chapter 228. As early as the 1,000 layers of flames ignited, the Sparks Mercenary Group, led by Countercurrent, had already panicked. They knew all too well how powerful this spell was. This spell came stealthily, and they only noticed it when it was ignited. There was no time to dodge it. Even worse, a few people had already been set on fire, but they didn't even know where the person who cast the spell was. The melee professions all went to surround Unscathed in battle, while Countercurrent led the mages, archers, and other ranged professions to speed up their search for Gu Fei's figure in the trees. Countercurrent had a lot of experience. From the place where the 1,000 layers of flames landed, he had roughly circled the area where Gu Fei was. They didn't have to walk too far, they just had to carefully search within this circle. Just as they pointed their staffs, bows, and other weapons into the sky, Gu Fei's Skyfall flaming wheel was heard. Everyone didn't know where this spell was thrown, and they were scared out of their wits. Countercurrent's reaction was the fastest. He chased after him and shouted, "Don't panic, look carefully before you speak." The Skyfall flaming wheel wasn't like the 1,000 layers of flames. It would take some time for it to fall from the sky, and the fast professions could just barely dodge it. However, before the Skyfall flaming wheel came, Gu Fei's figure came out of the shadows of the trees, and with a loud shout, he descended from the sky. Gu Fei's descent came very quickly, and no one had time to react, let alone attack. Gu Fei's head was on the ground, and his feet were in the sky, falling straight towards Unscathed in battle. Suddenly, he waved his arm in the air, and the night streak came out from under his body. He stretched his wrist over his head, and with a shake of his wrist, he shouted, "Round sky, square earth, dual flame flash." Everyone was stunned, not knowing what spell this was. The sword light that Gu Fei drew out turned into a fire dragon, circling in a circle, and circling in front of Gu Fei. He had actually relied on his own skills and used dual flame flash to draw out a miniature version of the descending flame wheel. At that moment, Gu Fei just happened to descend above Unscathed in battle. The circle of fiery light he slashed out was just in time to strike everyone within a circle of Unscathed in battle. In an instant, all of them were reduced to ashes. Gu Fei's dual flame flash was simply not on the same level as his other spells. As for the chanting just now, it could not be said that Gu Fei was shouting blindly. This was because the circle of swords that Gu Fei had drawn was a move of the Gu clan's swordplay called Round Sky Square Earth. So cool! Unscathed in battle suddenly had reinforcements, and his spirits were lifted. He roared as he extended his arm to catch the falling Gu Fei. For a violent warrior like him, this was a piece of cake. Who would have thought that Gu Fei would borrow this momentum to twist his body and fly into the air? His left hand pushed against Unscathed in battle's shoulder, and he kicked out at the face of a player in the middle of the circle. This kick was not over yet. After stomping down on the guy's face, Gu Fei strode around Unscathed in battle and spun in the air. Pa pa pa. The people around Unscathed in battle all had their faces stamped by Gu Fei. As the force of the kick gradually weakened, Gu Fei's foot also gradually lowered, from his forehead to his chin. He hurriedly yelled, "Give me a lift." Unscathed in battle thought that Gu Fei had some kind of ultimate move, so he didn't say anything else and pushed Gu Fei into the air. Unscathed in battle's strength was not fake. With one push, Gu Fei immediately rose another 2 meters into the air. He struck a handsome pose in the air, pointed his finger and chanted, "Teleport, move." Shoo! Gu Fei immediately disappeared in midair like a god. Unscathed in battle's tears almost fell. He angrily yelled, "Damn, he left just like that? And he said he was your brother." Gu Fei was originally more than a meter above the ground. Unscathed in battle helped him rise another 2 meters, and then teleported another 5 meters. This 8 meters above the ground was where the foliage was. No one knew where Gu Fei teleported to. The forest was silent. Gu Fei flew down from the sky, and his dual flame flash killed a circle of people. Then he stomped in a circle, and without even touching the ground, he disappeared into the air. All of this happened in the blink of an eye, and the rhythm was so tight that it made everyone feel like they were suffocating. Especially the people that Gu Fei had stomped on. At this time, they all covered their faces with one hand and looked up at the sky with empty eyes. Their minds were already blank. Unscathed in battle was actually still surrounded, but when he saw that the people around him were like stone statues, his wretched thoughts came back, and he wanted to take the opportunity to sneak away. This movement immediately made the other side come back to their senses. They temporarily stopped thinking about Gu Fei and swung their swords, axes, and hammers at Unscathed in battle. At this time, Unscathed in battle didn't have the heroic spirit from before. After struggling for a while, he looked up to the sky and wailed, "Qianli, hurry up and come save me. Brother, go in peace." At this time, Unscathed in battle suddenly received a message from Gu Fei. He suddenly raised his head and saw a flash of fire in the sky, and a proper heavenly flame wheel descended from the sky. After suffering from Gu Fei's 1,000 layers flames, and being surrounded by enemies, Unscathed in battle at this time definitely couldn't withstand Gu Fei's heavenly flame wheel. Just as he was about to die, a white light suddenly appeared and bathed his body. This wasn't the signal of death, but a priest's restore. With the support of this restore, Unscathed in battle once again survived under Gu Fei's spell. However, his health was already at the bottom, and he was in a situation where he would die if he stumbled a little. Fortunately, this restore didn't give up on him. One after another, Unscathed in battle's health was instantly replenished. "Yo, you're willing to help?" Gu Fei was very surprised. Wushang's equipment is quite good, and he can tank quite well. "It's not a bad idea to let him be the bait," replied Han family young master. Countercurrent, who was under the tree, saw this restore and was not unfamiliar with it at all. Han family young master was a priest that focused on spirit, and this was how fast and efficient the restore was when it came to casting restore. A priest's restore had two important attributes. One was the speed of the restore, and the other was the effect of the restore. Speed included both the activation speed of the skill and the completion time of the skill. Of course, the faster the skill, the more efficient it was. As for the effect, it naturally referred to how much health the restore could restore. The attributes that affected the effect were first intelligence, then constitution. The attributes that affected speed were first spirit, then intelligence. Since the priest's advantage was constitution, adding points to constitution became the most popular way for priests in the parallel world. Not only did it increase one's health, but it also increased the effect of one's restore, killing two birds with one stone. For constitution, 1 intelligence, 3 constitution, 1 intelligence, 1 spirit, 3 constitution, 2 intelligence. There were all sorts of slightly different ways of adding points, but all of them placed constitution in the most important position. In the parallel world, out of 10 priests, 9 out of 10 would add points in this way. The fact that so many people were using this method showed that it was not a mistake. It was indeed the safest and most effective way for a priest to survive. However, this method did not seem to be able to maximize the priest's restore effect. Therefore, there were naturally some people who researched methods that ignored constitution and purely focused on intelligence and spirit. The goal of this method was to maximize the priest's abilities. However, in order to maximize the effect, the two attributes of speed and effect needed to be the most scientific and effective combination. This combination was called the golden ratio by non-constitution priests. Since the start of the game, the golden ratio for priests was still a legendary existence, and it was gradually becoming a joke. This was because every priest believed that their combination was the golden ratio for priests. There were even some constitution priests who did not belong to this field who claimed that their combination was the golden ratio. There were many opinions, but no conclusion could be reached. During a party with singing and wine, Against the Current was in the same party as young Master Han. While they were chatting, they accidentally talked about the golden ratio for clerics. Everyone expressed their opinions, and even some players who were not priests expressed their opinions. In the end, Han family young master, who had been silent all this while, said coldly, "What's there to argue about? The strongest priest has the closest combination to the golden ratio." It was this sentence that made Upstream start to pay attention to Han family young master, and he realized that this priest was extraordinarily strong. His skills and awareness were all the best. Upstream had never seen a priest who was better than him in the parallel world. Using Han family young master's theory, he was the priest closest to the golden ratio out of all the priests that Upstream knew. For example, A heal had saved the warrior before the heavenly fire wheel could descend. Then, a few more heal had restored the warrior's HP back to full. Out of all the priests he knew, only the young master of the Han family could do this. The simplest example was that Waterflower also had a priest with her, and she was an expert in the guild. However, she couldn't do anything about the heavenly fire wheel. Those who were quick to react only thought of healing now. Unscathed in battle, full of HP, was once again full of fighting spirit. He raised his hand and sent the people around him flying. These people had just eaten Gu Fei's heavenly fire wheel. Thieves were basically extinct, and the warriors that survived were all in danger after being rammed by Unscathed in battle. However, Upstream didn't even look over, and only signaled for the priests to hurry up and help. Waterflower mercenary group had 72 people in the battle. With Gu Fei's continuous attacks and Unscathed in battle's explosive attacks, they had already killed 17 people. However, 55 people were more than enough to deal with a single warrior like Unscathed in battle. What they needed to be wary of was the unknown attack from the sky. Chapter 229. Without the support of a cleric, the warriors quickly regained their footing and began a heated battle with Unscathed in battle. Unscathed in battle had his back against a tree and was surrounded by 5 people, but he was able to hold on for a while. This showed how wise Unscathed in battle had been to invest most of the loot from the fan meeting into clothing. Warriors didn't have the sneak attacks of thieves, nor did they have the combo attacks of grandmasters of combat. Therefore, it was usually a face-to-face, head-on fight. It was almost impossible to completely avoid damage from the opponent. Kill 1,000 enemies, hurt 800. This was the truest portrayal of PvP between warriors, especially in a battle between warriors. In a one-on-one fight, it was a good idea to quickly take down the opponent by attacking and defending. However, in a one-versus-many fight, having good defense would allow one to last longer on the battlefield and take down more enemies. At the same time, it would reduce the burden on one's cleric. Unscathed in battle's equipment followed this train of thought. For a moment, he was fighting 1 against 5, but he didn't feel pressured. Under the tree, swords and swords clashed. Countercurrent didn't care about what was happening. He quickly organized the mages and archers, the 2 ranged classes, to attack the treetop. Even the clerics who didn't have much to do were assigned to fight with holy light orbs. Although the damage of holy light orbs was insignificant, they shone brightly and were much more effective than fireball in illuminating the dark forest. The people on the treetop held their breath, afraid that they would be shot by the people below. Yutian Shinming's but was shot by an arrow, but he gritted his teeth and did not move, only fiercely remembering the archer who shot him. Countercurrent and the others weren't shooting blindly. Gu Fei's previous spell allowed Countercurrent to roughly estimate his location. The Han family young master's continuous healing just now made his location even more obvious. At this moment, Countercurrent and the 2 priests were whispering and pointing at each other. Very soon, Countercurrent raised his hand and ordered everyone to throw arrows and fireballs in the direction he indicated. When Gu Fei saw the other party's momentum, he knew that the young master of the Han clan would not be able to hide anymore. Although this wave of attacks had yet to reach his hiding place, if they followed the train of thought of going against the current, they would be able to search the place like a map. Sooner or later, they would knock the Han family young master down from the tree. Gu Fei's position was not far from the Han family young master. He was also on the trajectory of their map, but he was different. He could teleport. Just as his opponent's attack was about to reach him, teleportation's cooldown ended. Gu Fei silently chanted and immediately flew to another safe location. Looking back, the waves of attacks from the opponents were about to reach the location of the Han family young master. Without an extremely fast movement technique like teleportation, if someone were to crawl on a tree to dodge the attacks, they would definitely be discovered by the people below. Simply put, the Han family young master could only wait to be killed. There was nothing he could do. However, he was very calm and did not panic at all. He took out a small bottle of wine and continued to drink. Seeing that the attacks were about to reach him, he threw the bottle down. The bottle was thrown to the place where the battle was raging. Unscathed in battle, and a few warriors were smashing each other's heads, causing them to bleed. The Han family young master's bottle had suddenly arrived, but no one noticed it. With a bang, it landed on a warrior's shoulder and shattered. Ugh! That guy's here again. The warriors scattered in all directions as if their butts were on fire, leaving unscathed in battle alone. They all looked up in shock. As the guild leader, Countercurrent felt a little embarrassed. He pointed at a few people and scolded, "How many times have I told you to stay calm when you're in trouble? Did you see what it was? Why are you so flustered?" Actually, they couldn't be blamed. Gu Fei was really too strong, and they were just a little nervous. Countercurrent, who had been looking up at the sky, saw that it was a bottle of wine. He also saw the direction in which the bottle was coming. He had already ordered everyone to attack in that direction. However, he saw the Han family young master suddenly push aside a leaf, poking his head out and smiling. He then jumped fiercely and flew into the crowd. Magic has caught up. At this time, Gu Fei had already received the news. However, the problem was that this tactic had already been seen through by Countercurrent. A few people who wanted to rush up and surround him were quickly stopped by him. "Don't go up. Archers, mages, get ready." The Han family young master fell to the ground with a thud. His body was half squatting, and he grimaced in pain. Falling straight down from a height of 8 meters would definitely hurt him. The archers and mages were already on standby. Seeing that he had landed, they immediately attacked together. However, the young master of the Han family had already calculated this step. He had already observed the positions of the people below the tree. He had chosen his spot carefully before taking the initiative to jump. As soon as he landed on the ground, he rolled to the side without thinking and hid behind a large tree. This position was the blind spot of all the mages and archers who were waiting for Countercurrent. This was the major weakness of ranged classes. All the people who attacked in a straight line missed, but the attacks with tracking arrows and fireballs were able to catch up to the target effectively. Unfortunately, it was useless. After all, the Han family young master was a priest, and one who had reached the legendary golden ratio. Taking advantage of the time difference between the attacks, he easily saved his life. "Hurry!" Countercurrent waved his hand, gesturing for everyone to switch positions and find a place where they could attack. He had thought that by hiding behind the tree, he would be able to see the Han family young master in a few steps. However, after moving a few steps, his line of sight was not blocked by the tree, but by something else. The Han family young master's choice of position was not simple. Of course, things were not that perfect. Finally, an archer found his position and saw the Han family young master leaning against the tree. He knocked his arrow excitedly. Suddenly, he felt a chill at his waist. He turned around in shock, only to see the sword demon's ever-serious expression as he meticulously took care of him. "There's another one here." Someone discovered the sword demon's existence and hurriedly launched an attack in his direction. However, the sword demon's skills were different from the Han family young masters. He shuttled through the forest very agilely. Those ranged classes always had a straight line of attacks, so they could not do anything to the sword demon for a while. 124,253, 120,251, 117,146. The coordinates kept flashing in the sword demon's private message, but it was the Han family young master's guidance. With the guidance of the Han family young master, who had completely grasped the terrain and was familiar with the coordinates, the sword demon shuttled through the forest. He had already snuck behind the archer or mage 3 times. Including the previous one, he had taken care of a total of 4 people. Countercurrent felt frightened and hurriedly gathered everyone not to scatter, but to gather first. In the end, this flustered command once again caused him to lose sight of the other. The sword demon's ghost-like movements disrupted Countercurrent's train of thought. Gather? That would make him face a more terrifying enemy. The archer and mage, who had just united with Countercurrent as the center, suddenly felt hot under their feet. Those who reacted quickly had already cried out. Everyone cried and ran in all directions, but it was too late. the 1,000 layers of flame rose from the ground. These people with low HP couldn't withstand this attack, and only some mages with high magic defense survived. But before they could rejoice, the flames above their heads turned, and an overwhelming fire wheel descended. The mages and archers of the Waterflower mercenary group were scattered by Gu Fei's pincer attack. The situation was a mess, and even Countercurrent was somewhat unable to control it. The Han family young master, who was hiding behind a tree, even showed his head and replenished the HP of Unscathed in Battle over there. Unscathed in Battle, who had been submissively persevering, suddenly became spirited. It wasn't because of the Han family young master's recovery, but because the cooldown time of the Whirlwind Slash he had used before was finally over. Whirlwind Slash was a powerful skill, but its cooldown time was not short. The Han family young master's recovery made him even more confident, and he didn't care about the attacks of the 5 people. He forcibly squeezed 2 steps forward, and had already used Whirlwind Slash with his 2 swords. Unscathed in Battle's defense was high, but his attack was definitely not low either. The 5 people were madly attacked by him, and their hearts were filled with regret. The 5 warriors all thought that they could easily defeat Unscathed in Battle with 5 against 1, but they didn't expect it to drag out to this point. If they had known earlier, they wouldn't have needed 5 people to attack together. 2 or 3 of them could have used Whirlwind Slash together, and Unscathed in Battle would have long been killed. The only thing to blame was the long cooldown time of Whirlwind Slash, which was why most warriors liked to use it at critical moments. 5 people against 1? In this kind of situation, they couldn't be blamed for being frugal, but now they were the ones who were being counterattacked by Unscathed in Battle. Unscathed in Battle had been attacked for a long time, and he had accumulated a lot of rage. His 2 swords spun endlessly, and the 5 warriors were at the center of the whirlpool, unable to resist. Soon, they all turned into white light and disappeared. At this time, Yu Tianshunming, who was on the tree, wasn't idle either. Brother Yu, who was not far from him, gave him a power blessing, and he began to look for targets to shoot arrows. It was already a mess under the tree. On one hand, they were afraid of Sword Demon's mysterious appearance, and on the other hand, they were afraid of Gu Fei's destructive airdrop spell. For a moment, no one paid attention to Yu Tianshunming's sneak attack. "Calm down, don't panic." Against the Current anxiously waved his staff and yelled. After the chaos just now, the Waterflower mercenary group lost another 25 people, and now there were only 30 left. What's worse was that more than half of the 30 people were priests and knights, and there were only a few who had real combat power left. Gu Fei's spell went on cooldown after a burst, and the sword ghoul hid in a corner after a sneak attack. Wushang took care of the 5 warriors around him, and the phalanx that faced him became the clerics. They had the advantage in numbers, but they were all scared off by him alone. The forest was quiet, and only Yu Tianshunming was still busy. He finally found the guy who shot him in the butt. "Bastard!" Yu Tianshunming clenched his teeth. He had not been willing to use his sniper shot all this time just for this moment. The sound of the arrow rang. 29. There were only 29 people left in the Waterflower mercenary group. Chapter 230. From the moment he went against the current and led the group into the forest, he had followed young Master Han's plan step by step. Using one's own people as bait for Gu Fei's AoE spell to kill them? This was only a very small part of the trap. With this method, the first person to fall into the trap might fall for it, but after the first person was killed by Gu Fei's spell, the next person to fall would be the same as Upstream's previous judgment. The melee classes would be stopped, and the ranged classes would be used instead. When he went against the flow and made this judgment, he had truly fallen into the trap. The melee classes didn't dare to get close, and ranged classes were restricted in the forest. No matter how many people the Waterflower mercenary group had, their battle strength had already been weakened to the limit. This was the main point of Han family young master's battle plan. Using one's own people as bait, and Gu Fei would kill them. This entire scene was actually the bait, luring him to go against the current and make the decision that young Master Han was waiting for. Upstream's judgment couldn't be said to be wrong. If this was a normal fight, Waterflower wouldn't have lost even if she had the advantage in numbers. Unfortunately, he wasn't facing an ordinary opponent. He was facing an elite team made up of top experts. Everyone in the group exerted their full strength, causing more splashes to bloom. The people who stirred up the water were at a loss as to what to do. In such a situation, Upstream's emotions were unstable, and he finally made a major mistake in his command, giving Gu Fei an opportunity to take advantage of. 29 people. There were only 29 left, and the majority were priests and paladins. The players in charge of fighting in the Waterflower mercenary group finally had the ultimate configuration of their dreams. Every one of them could now have a professional priest and a professional paladin behind them. This was a treatment that only the top experts in the guild could receive. But at this moment, not a single one of them could smile. There was silence in the forest. Gu Fei, Sword Demon, and Yutian Shenming seemed to have discussed it and suddenly stopped attacking. Han family young master was still hiding behind the tree. Brother Yu was still hiding in the tree. Only Unscathed in Battle was casually standing in front of the 29 people. From the start of the battle, Unscathed in Battle's fall from the tree was exposed to the public. However, he was not the one leading the attack. However, Unscathed in Battle didn't really care. Today's battle was a glorious one for him. More importantly, he had earned a lot of points today, which was very rare. He had always been the one with the lowest points among the 6 members of the mercenary group. Gu Fei, Sword Demon, and Yutian Shenming had points for killing enemies. Han family young master and brother Yu had bonus points for non-combat elements. As for him, the number of enemies he killed in every battle was limited. Sword Demon saw that he always got 1, 2, and 3 points, which was quite pitiful. He actually gave him 5 points for protecting Han family young master and brother Yu. What a shame. This was simply a shame. The number 1 warrior in the game also had pride, but in this mercenary group, he was actually reduced to a bodyguard. Unscathed in Battle had always been looking forward to a chance to show off, and today he finally got it. But fortunately, Gu Fei saved him at the beginning, or else he would have been beaten out of the game. Unscathed in Battle shuddered at the thought of it. If he had been killed, he wouldn't even have a reason to get 5 points for being a bodyguard. Unscathed in Battle's imagination was running wild. He treated the 29 people in front of him like they were nothing. The young master of the Han family also leisurely walked out from behind the tree, smiling as he watched the river flow upstream. Against the current also smiled bitterly. He was at his wit's end. Today's loss wasn't like the guild battle. That loss had a lot of elements to it, and no one was willing to accept it. But this time, it was a complete and utter defeat, so they had to accept it even if they didn't want to. Just as he was about to say a few pleasantries, the air in front of him suddenly rustled, and the branches and leaves suddenly parted to the sides. A figure had already sprung out, drifting toward upstream at lightning speed. But the people at Waterflower saw it clearly, and they all came to a realization. Wow, so it's a steel wire. The person who flew out was, of course, Gu Fei. He was holding a rope in his hand, and it was tied to who knows where on the tree. In short, he was flying over like Tarzan. Everyone saw this, and when they connected it to Gu Fei's ghost-like movements, they immediately felt that they had found a suitable scientific theory. Dual flame flash. Gu Fei didn't just fly, he also used a big move. He was full of mana after eating the fruit, so he didn't move much after using Dual Flame Flash. He just pointed downwards. With this swing, Dual Flame Flash turned into a flaming dragon, flying over the heads of the Waterflower mercenaries who were still marveling at his steel wire technique. Those who were unlucky enough to be standing in Gu Fei's path were killed one by one. 25. Waterflower mercenaries lost 4 people in one go. However, Gu Fei was not the real Tarzan. Even when he practiced martial arts, he did not practice the ability of a monkey flying around on a tree. When Gu Fei returned to the highest point, he found that there was no place for him to land. As a result, Gu Fei could only follow the law of conservation of energy, turning potential energy back into kinetic energy and flying back. This infuriated the people at Waterflower mercenaries. This was because all the martial arts, science fiction, and even the animal world that he usually came into contact with would use such a flying posture. After a swing, he would definitely land on another tree in a very natural and unrestrained manner. No one expected Gu Fei to be so unscrupulous. After flying out, he couldn't find a place to land, and then flew back without any backbone. If he kept going back and forth like this, wouldn't it be like playing on a swing? Swings were the main prop used in romantic dramas to send flirtatious messages. Everyone was currently acting out a hot-blooded fight scene, so this was obviously very out of place. Gu Fei also felt that he couldn't keep swinging like this, and made a prompt decision. As he swung back, he drew his sword and chanted, "Teleport, move." The advantage of an instant skill was that there was no need to set up a pose. He could use it whenever he wanted. As soon as Gu Fei finished chanting, he disappeared from the end of the rope. The people at Waterflower Mercenaries were still looking up at Gu Fei, but when they saw that he had disappeared, they all looked up at the trees, wondering if he had flown up again and would pull a rope down when they weren't paying attention. Suddenly, a scream came from behind them. Everyone turned around and saw Gu Fei swinging his sword behind them. Not only him, but the thief had also appeared out of nowhere. Taking advantage of the fact that everyone's attention was focused elsewhere, he took advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. The two of them killed 2 people at lightning speed, then disappeared and found a random tree to hide in. With the guidance of the Han family young master, who was extremely good at maps and coordinates, the places he pointed out were definitely in the blind spots of the large group of people. Poor Yutian Shenming, who had no sense of direction, couldn't enjoy the guidance of the Han family young master. He could only lie pitifully on the tree and sneakily shoot arrows. The sword demon and Gu Fei, one in stealth and the other in teleportation, would suddenly appear to harass them as soon as their cooldowns were up. They would quietly appear, take 2 or 3 lives, then disappear again. Above them, Yutian Shenming would occasionally shoot arrows. On the other side, unscathed in battle would carry his 2 great swords and feint a charge. The number of people at Waterflower Mercenaries dwindled, and those who hadn't died weren't far from having a mental breakdown. The only thing they gained was a deeper understanding of the cooldown of Gu Fei's teleportation. After repeated torment, Waterflower Mercenaries couldn't come up with any good countermeasures. They could only watch as their numbers dwindled one by one. When there were only 5 people left, the Han family young master once again floated out from behind the tree. He looked at upstream and smiled, "Let's forget about it," against the current side and squeezed out a smile. "See you later." The Han family young master nodded. Upstream gestured to the remaining 4 people on his side. They all had tired expressions on their faces and didn't raise any objections. They simply retreated. In the semi-finals of the mercenary competition, the 6 people from Child Elite Group actually won once again, achieving a perfect score. Having killed to this extent, just the experience and gold reward alone were already very generous. Needless to say, the 6 members of the elite group were naturally overjoyed. However, on the surface, they maintained a calm expression. This was because the moment they stepped out of the teleportation point, Upstream had been waiting for them. They couldn't help but give their usual praises. Upstream's intention to win them over was already too obvious. They were just short of saying that they would all be his bosses once they entered his guild. But at times like this, the pretentiousness of these experts became even more prominent. Yutian's spirit pretended to be aloof and disdainful. Unscathed in battle pretended to be low-key, so humble that it made people feel disgusted. Brother, you felt a little lonely. He knew that in terms of strength, he still didn't have such a high level. They were so enthusiastic towards him mainly because of the others. Sword Demon's reply was more serious. "Let's not think about this for now." The Han family young master didn't say a word. He was originally a member of Drinking and Singing. Gu Fei was the person they were most looking forward to. He waited for the others to express their opinions one by one before putting on a helpless expression, looking like he was going with the flow. Upstream also knew that forcing things would only cause annoyance, so he didn't say much. He laughed and said, "Then I'll look forward to working together in the future. If there are any difficult missions, I'll definitely ask for your help." The mercenary group was, of course, open for business. No matter how bad the Han family young master was, he couldn't reject the goodwill that was delivered to his doorstep. He naturally laughed and said, "We're all so familiar with each other, of course we'll help if there's anything." It was rather strange for a match to be lost in such a joyous manner. There was great harmony before the battle, and it was still great harmony after the battle. This competition finally ended in harmony. Chapter 231. The match between Child Elite Group and Waterflower Mercenary Group was rather slow. By the time they came out, the other match had already ended. The Black Hand Mercenary Group, the #1 mercenary group in Cloud City as determined by the Mercenary Building, had made it to the finals. One side was called the Black Hand Mercenary Group, while the other was publicly acknowledged as a dark horse. The finals had already been covered with a dark attribute. Although the Black Hand Mercenary Group was the #1 mercenary group in Cloud City, they usually did nothing but grind for quests. They weren't like the 4 Seas Mercenary Group, whose members were the elites of big guilds and were more famous. Suddenly facing this opponent, Brother Yu realized that the information he had was pitifully little. He hurriedly looked for his friends and inquired about it on the forums. Intelligence work was the time when Brother Yu had the most sense of existence in Child Elite Group. No one paid much attention to the guild competition later on. The main reason was that there was a huge difference in the number of people between guilds. There were only 2 level 5 guilds in Cloud City. One was Unhindered, and the other was Singing to Wine. Now that Singing to Wine had been hacked by Amethyst, Unhindered had 750 people, and the remaining level 4 guilds only had 500 people at most. The difference of 250 people wasn't something that could be easily erased. At this time, the system announced the latest news. The 2 guilds and mercenary groups that were eliminated in the semifinals will also compete on the last day to determine the 3rd place. The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place guilds and mercenary groups will definitely receive equipment or items that could only be obtained randomly in the previous competition. As for what exactly they would receive, it was still random. The date of the competition was no longer the next day, but 3 days later, this week Saturday. This was a rare show of humanity by the system. After all, it was a competition that would give out rewards. Of course, no one would want to miss it. If it was on a normal day, it would deliberately cause trouble for those who had work and couldn't participate at night. All the guilds and mercenary groups were nervously preparing for the competition. The random rewards were not something they could afford to lose. On the other hand, the Child Elite Group was still the same. It wasn't that they were aloof and didn't care, but because they were just a small group of 6. They were very mobile, and when the 6 of them gathered together, it was as easy as eating and drinking. How could it be so easy for a guild like Reigning the 4 Seas to gather 750 players for a meeting? It was a Thursday. After Gu Fei went online, he was a little depressed as he arrived at the north gate of Cloud City. Why was he depressed? That afternoon, during the physical education class, Gu Fei felt that the atmosphere was not right as he stood in front of the students. The aura that the students displayed when facing him was completely different from usual. Simply put, the murderous aura was thicker. After teaching the class in this strange atmosphere, Gu Fei was just about to dismiss the class when he was surrounded by more than 20 students. There were both men and women among them, and they were all talking at once. "Teacher, come to our guild. Teacher, bring us to level up. Teacher, bring us on a mission. Teacher, I'm so poor, give me some money. Teacher, is there any equipment that you don't want?" Gu Fei was dizzy from all the shouting. The other students were very surprised to see Teacher Gu Fei suddenly receiving such a splendid treatment. After inquiring about the whole story, they muttered, "Even the teacher is playing? Then I should also give it a try." Gu Fei glanced at them. Among them, there were many who regarded the teacher's words as an imperial edict and followed everything the teacher said. In the normal teacher's definition, they were absolutely good students. Once they followed his example, they all ran to play online games. If their parents asked, and they casually said, "I learned it from Teacher Gu," would they have a good ending? Gu Fei wasn't afraid of fighting, But these troublesome trifles weren't something that could be solved by fighting. The chaotic situation made Gu Fei miss the Cinder 3000 Flames in the game for the first time. Stop arguing! Gu Fei didn't lose his identity amidst the sounds of the game around him. He didn't forget that this was reality and not a parallel world. In an instant he put on the airs of a teacher. When the teacher was angry, no student dared to make a sound, at least not in the group that Gu Fei was facing. Don't you need to do homework at night? Play games. Teacher Gu Fei put on airs and scolded. However, these words didn't feel right coming from the mouth of a PE teacher. However, the students still subconsciously lowered their heads and showed signs of remorse. All of you, go run 10 laps on the field. This was the right thing to say. Half of the students immediately felt weak in their legs. The standard field of the school was 400 meters per lap. 10 laps was 4,000 meters, which was 4 times the standard long-distance running for middle school students. Normally, the long-distance running event in the school was 3,000 meters. Only students with strong confidence and perseverance would participate. For 1,000 meters, there were already girls with tears in their eyes. Teacher, you're not joking, right? Someone asked timidly. Of course, Gu Fei was joking. The students still had classes later on. 4,000 meters was too much of a waste of time. He immediately waved his hand and said, "Run 2 laps first, then quickly go to class." The students left with tears streaming down their faces. Gu Fei stood at the side of the track and solemnly looked at them. He didn't urge the students to speed up. All the members of the Ultimate Class 3 of the Parallel World Cloud City Guild were running together on the track. There was no need to explain how united this guild was, right? This wasn't a test, so there was no need to run too fast. However, under the gaze of the teacher, they didn't dare to run too fast. They kept stopping and running. Running 800 meters without stopping was enough to make them tired. Especially for the girls, they all cried and shouted for the boys to run 1 more lap. At this time, the students who were watching the show had mostly dispersed. In front of Gu Fei were only the students of the Ultimate Class 3. They all looked like they wanted to die. Gu Fei was very kind. He waved his hand and said, "Wait for me at the city gate tonight." This turn of events surprised the students for a moment. Then they cheered. Many guild bosses dreamed of Gu Fei's in-game name hundreds and thousands of times, but it was all too easy for students like him to find out. That account name was given by AFA. After the students asked, they went to check the wizard level leaderboard. Level 40. To this group of students, it was too high up. Whether it was from an entertainment point of view or a financial point of view, roping in a teacher was a good choice. This made the students make up their minds. Now that their goal was achieved, everyone was obviously very happy. Seeing that Gu Fei was about to leave, AFA had played games for a long time and was more experienced. He caught up to Gu Fei and asked cautiously, "Teacher, which gate is it?" "Talk too much. Go run another lap." Gu Fei said. AFA was a weak student who ran the opposite of the 3 good students. He was half dead after running 2 laps. 1 more lap and he would really die. Luckily, his question reminded the other students. They immediately surrounded him and asked for the specific address. Helpless, Gu Fei could only agree to meet them at the North Gate. Having an agreement with the students was definitely unavoidable. At most, they wouldn't see each other in the game. This was the saying, "A monk can run, but the temple can't run." Helpless, Gu Fei arrived at the North Gate at the appointed time. In the end, not a single student appeared. Gu Fei was burning with anger. "The teacher didn't stand you guys up, but you guys actually stood me up." According to normal thinking, he should definitely call himself lousy here. But since he was facing the students, he should change it as a teacher. Anyway, it was only a difference of 1 word. This was how Gu Fei reminded himself. If he really called himself lousy in front of the students, not only would it not have any effect on them, the students might even think that he was more approachable. This was really troublesome. Playing online with the students? There was only 1 word to describe it. Gu Fei cursed the author 1,000 times in his heart. "Can you stop writing nonsense?" Cough. back to the main topic. It was already the appointed time, but the students still didn't show up. Gu Fei patiently waited for a while. Finally, he saw the students running over one by one from each of the offline areas. There were all sorts of explanations as well. Mommy told me to wash the dishes. Daddy dug a landmine and made me wait for a while longer. Gu Fei burst into tears. It was so close to life and easy to understand. Thinking back to when he told the sword demon and the others to go offline because they had to go to class, their eyes were so strange. The students that came added Gu Fei as a friend. For the bosses of Cloud City, an excellent opportunity was missed. That night, from 7 to 7:17, Gu Fei's friend switch was not turned off. Cough, stand in line. After the students were all present, Gu Fei said in a deep voice. Unfortunately, there was no such item as whistle in the game. Using fingers to play? That was too hooligan. Be a teacher, be a teacher. Wah, teacher, please don't, it's too embarrassing. The students protested. Was there anything more embarrassing than being called teacher in the game? Gu Fei continued to cry, but there was no other way. Letting the students call him by his name, even though it was just his ID, was too disrespectful. Calling him Brother Z like Fireball and the others was even more embarrassing than calling him teacher. Gu Fei wanted to embarrass everyone together, so he insisted that the students stand in line. The students hesitated. Gu Fei's face darkened. If you don't stand, finish the 8 laps in the next class. The students quickly stood in line. Gu Fei counted the number of people. There were exactly 24, 4 rows and 6 rows. My PE class representative didn't come? Gu Fei glanced at the crowd. He did not pay attention to any of them in the afternoon. No, teacher, the number is just right. There were originally 21 people, and 3 more came after the afternoon class. Oh, it's just the 3 of them. That's 24 people. If there's one more. If there's one more, stand in 5 rows. If there's 21, stand in 3 rows. What do you mean 24 people is just right? Ah Fei, you idiot. A student refuted. Ah Fei felt wronged. He did not think that a group of people would have to stand in line in the game. He said that it just so happened that he was not the type to count. When Gu Fei heard that there were 3 new students in the afternoon, he was distressed. What should he do? Chapter 232. The city gate was bustling with people at this time. The neatly lined-up group of players quickly attracted a lot of attention. Gu Fei stood majestically at the front of the line, but from his expression, it seemed like he didn't know these students. What's going on? Some players whispered. I don't know. It's the army, it's the army. The country has sent the army into the game. The country is starting to pay attention to the game world. Some people were excited. Fuck you, you've read too many YY novels. Damn, a bunch of brats. Are you a Boy Scout army? There were many different opinions, but Gu Fei decided to carry on the embarrassment to the end. He looked at the line and said, Is there a class leader? What's the class leader? A soldier in the line raised his hand and called out, Teacher, what's the matter? Oh, the physical education class representative isn't here, so you'll temporarily take over. Come, lead the team, let's go. Gu Fei said. Wow, teacher, you're too cunning, pushing such an embarrassing task to me. The class leader was about to faint. These errands were quite natural in real life, but it was extremely embarrassing in the game. Hurry up. Hurry up. Is it fun to be stared at here? Gu Fei urged. The students of course wanted to find a hole to crawl into, but now that they finally escaped, the class leader was still dawdling and immediately glared at them. Hurry up. The students revolted. The class leader had a long face and shouted, Turn left, run. Amidst the sounds of surprise, the students ran out of the north gate in an orderly fashion. Run, be orderly, aren't you going to shout the slogan? Gu Fei pointed at the back. Teacher, spare us. The students shouted. The slogan that Gu Fei was referring to was, of course, the shouting of 1, 2, 3, 4 that would erupt from time to time as the students lined up to run. Now that they were afraid of being noticed, They still had to shout this to attract attention. It was too painful. Everyone began to wonder if it was a mistake to get close to the teacher in the game. Oh, then forget it. When the slogan is shouted, the footsteps are messed up. Class leader. Gu Fei shouted. Want to do. The class leader shouted helplessly. It seemed like being the class monitor was also a mistake. After exiting the city gate, there were players everywhere. The students' movements were stiff as they ran. Their heads were lower and lower. From afar, they looked like a group of headless zombies. After advancing for an unknown period of time, the surroundings gradually became desolate. Some of the students were shocked. They realized that it had been a long time since they heard their teacher speak. They turned around and saw that Gu Fei was at least 200 meters away from them in the vast wilderness outside the Cloud City. The students stopped in their tracks and waited for the teacher to arrive. Why did you stop? If I didn't say stop, then don't stop. Stay where you are. There were no outsiders here, so Gu Fei directly gave the order. The students kicked on the spot, and Gu Fei carefully corrected everyone's footsteps, as if he was teaching a class. Only when they were in complete harmony did they shout, "Attention! Have we arrived?" Gu Fei asked. What do you mean? The students didn't understand. If we haven't arrived, why did you stop? Gu Fei asked. The students looked at each other. Where are we going? How would I know where you guys are going? Gu Fei asked. The students fainted. So it was a waste of time. Gu Fei was already looking for a scapegoat. Class leader, where are you going? The class leader wanted to cry. He swore in his heart that he would definitely pull the physical education class representative in. He could only say helplessly, I don't know. I just lowered my head and led blindly. I'm not familiar with the map. Right, we should let a FA lead. He's been in the game for the longest. He's the most familiar. The class leader had a flash of inspiration. He realized that there was no need for the physical education class representative. IFA was speechless. Normally, no one would even look at him. But in times of crisis, he was always pushed to the front line. He was the most useless guild leader in the entire Cloud City. Gu Fei didn't dwell on this issue. He continued to ask, Then why did you all come to me today? The students looked at each other. Teacher, join our guild. Teacher, help us level up. Teacher, help us do quests. Teacher, I'm so poor. Give me some money. Teacher, do you have any unwanted equipment? The same words as in the afternoon came again. Don't panic, don't panic. Gu Fei stopped everyone. Okay? I already have one. Leveling up? Teachers usually level up alone. Quests? There are so many of you. Can I lead all of you? Money? I still owe someone 1,800 gold coins. As for equipment, I do have some. I'll give them to you when we get back. Oh. The students cheered. One of the 5 conditions was reached. Moreover, it was the most affordable one. The students were already very happy. Dismiss now. Free time. Gather at the north gate at 9. Gu Fei waved his hand. Hey, don't. AFA immediately jumped out of the group. Everyone looked at him. There's a quest. There's a quest. AFA said. AFA stays. The rest of you can go. Gu Fei said. Don't. It's a guild quest. A guild quest. AFA said. The guild quest? Gu Fei frowned. He had only experienced a guild quest once. It was when Amethyst partnered up with June's Reign in his rebirth. In the end, it led to a head full of things. From being chased to being chased, from one against a group to a group against a group. Now that he thought about it, it was the most exciting time in the game. While Gu Fei was reminiscing, AFA was introducing the mission. Gu Fei could vaguely make out the gist of it. It seemed to be exterminating a group of bandits. Other than killing a total of 100 enemies, they also had to capture the bandit leader alive. Apart from AFA, the rest of the students from Ultimate Class 3 had slowly entered the game after the official launch. Moreover, high school students didn't have much time to play, so their levels were very low. The bandit leader would naturally be a boss. FA felt that with their guild's equipment, it would be too difficult to challenge a boss. However, with the help of a level 40 magician like Gu Fei, things might be different. Oh, boss? Hearing this, Gu Fei became a little more spirited. At the moment, it was not difficult for him to solo players or monsters. Perhaps only the bosses in the game could be a match for him. Gu Fei reminisced about Suo Tu's past. Although his attacks were still systemically inflexible, at least he had to be on high alert. This kind of nervousness wasn't something he would experience often. Where are you? Let's go. Gu Fei said. This way. FA prepared to lead the way. Gather, get into formation. Lead the team. Gu Fei shouted. There weren't many people in the wilderness, so the students didn't feel uncomfortable. They quickly got into formation. FA led the team energetically. He seemed to be enjoying himself. Wasn't that right? Since when did he have such a high status? The team advanced into a valley. This was part of the Cloud Valley, but it wasn't a mainstream leveling area. There were a few players in Luoluo. The neat formation of the Ultimate Class 3 was naturally very eye-catching. A few players stopped and stared at this strange scene. The students were all focused on the mission. They couldn't care about anything else. They marched into the small valley in an orderly manner. They could already see the bandit targets. The mission was split into two parts. First, kill 100 normal bandits. Second, capture the bandit leader alive. Teacher, we're relying on you to defeat the boss. The students were full of expectations for Gu Fei. It was always like this in the game. You looked up to those who were higher level than you. However, when you reached a certain level, you would feel that it was nothing. Now, you would start looking up to those of a higher level. Little bandit teacher, help us out too. But don't kill them. That won't count as our score. Gu Fei wasn't a member of the Ultimate Class 3. He obviously didn't have this mission in the mission window. The targets he killed were only experience points. Of course, it wouldn't count towards the number of enemies he killed. Teacher, show us your fire 3,000 layers flames. Let us experience it. FA was looking forward to it. He was only level 34. The flaming 3,000 layers flames could only be learned at level 36. Go lure the monsters. Gu Fei didn't mind showing off his skills to the students. Of course, he had to put away the night streamer. Because of the crowd's request, he couldn't kill the monsters. It was undeniable that even though the students were young and had low levels, they were still better than the girls who had been reborn as purple crystals when it came to playing games. Even the few female students who had been reborn as purple crystals were more outstanding than the girls who had been reborn as purple crystals after a long period of getting used to playing with their classmates. After all, Gu Fei had been in the game for so long and interacted with experts every day. He had a good eye. He was instantly gratified. It seemed that taking care of his students was much easier than taking care of the girls with the purple crystal of rebirth. After the two archer students ran out, they pulled a few monsters over. Everyone looked at Gu Fei in unison. Gu Fei was very calm. He pointed his finger forward and chanted, "Flaming 3,000 layers flames, rise." Teacher, why are you casting it at us? The two students who were luring the monsters were stunned. They ran left and right in a panic. Don't run around, Gu Fei said angrily. The two of them, one on the left and one on the right, led the monsters to the sides. Gu Fei's spell cast was slow, so he had calculated ahead. If they had continued to lead the monsters forward, the monsters would have stepped on his 1,000 layers flames of the cinnabar tree. As a result, it was a complete mess. The students were puzzled when they heard that Gu Fei had finished chanting but didn't see any spells. When the two of them lured the monsters to the left and right, the flaming 3,000 layers flames ignited with a boom. Not a single monster was burned. The students weren't super experts, so they couldn't notice the details. They only thought that Gu Fei had cast a spell, but it missed. There was an uproar. "Afet, can the teacher do it?" Someone whispered to Afet. After all, AFA was the most experienced among them. It's okay. AFA was also muttering in his heart. Chapter 233. Due to the coincidental loss of a person, Gu Fei's mighty image in the eyes of the students had already changed. However, he didn't mind it. He pointed at the sink 3,000 layers flames that didn't burn the monster and said to see that? Fei nodded. Gu Fei nodded as well. He waved his hand at the students. Let's go kill the monster. The battle of exterminating the bandits began fiercely. Gu Fei didn't stay idle. He was still very confident in his magic attacks without his sword. He believed that he couldn't kill any of the monsters instantly. So he used a few spells to help out from time to time. It wouldn't have mattered if he didn't help out. Everyone's heart sank. Some of the students who had some understanding of the game saw how the monster that Gu Fei had killed was still standing strong. They knew that Gu Fei's magic damage was probably not that great. Among them, Fei was the worst. He was the most knowledgeable in the game, and he was a sorcerer. Looking at Gu Fei's skill level, he felt that his damage was probably below his own. That wasn't the end. After casting a few spells, Gu Fei immediately retreated to the side. He took out a fruit from his pocket and started munching on it. His movements were extremely smooth and concise. It was obvious that he was the type of person who had practiced making perfect. Sorcerers used up their magic power so quickly because they didn't have enough magic power. There was only one explanation for that. They added points without adding them to intelligence. Sorcerers who added points without intelligence were trash. This was an indisputable fact. Currently, no matter how a sorcerer added points, it was impossible not to add intelligence. As Fei fought the monster, he ran to the side of Gu Fei, who was eating an apple. He asked timidly, "Teacher, how did you add points?" "All agility," Gu Fei replied. Fei almost vomited blood. The word, trash, was already in his mouth, but he didn't dare to spit it out. After a while, he asked in a daze, "Why? Why what? Why add agility?" "Because it increases speed," Gu Fei replied. "Speed?" Fei mumbled to himself. He could not think of any reason for a sorcerer to place so much importance on speed that he would disregard his intelligence. Just as he was about to ask for more details, Gu Fei suddenly shouted, "Be careful behind you," and threw half of the apple in his hand. It turned out that one of the students was in a daze because he couldn't find his target. He didn't even notice that a bandit had approached him from behind. Gu Fei smashed half an apple on his head. At the same time, he heard Gu Fei's warning, "Be careful behind you." He held his weapon horizontally and turned around, blocking the robber's knife. The surrounding students hurriedly came over to help, and in no time, the robber was defeated. Gu Fei was quite satisfied with the students' teamwork. He nodded in satisfaction and urged who was beside him, "Hurry up and fight the monsters. You're the strongest among them. Why are you just standing there?" Fei had no choice but to swallow his doubts and charge back into the battlefield. With everyone united and helping each other, the operation to suppress the bandits went very smoothly. As they fought, they counted the number of completed missions in the mission panel. 2 more. Fei took a deep breath. The bandit leader had yet to appear. Perhaps the second part of the mission would only be activated after killing 100 enemies. Thinking that he would have to rely on Gu Fei, Fei couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He turned around and stole a glance at Gu Fei before chanting a spell. 100! The students cheered. Gu Fei, who didn't do much during the whole process, was now on high alert. He had the same thought as Fei. He thought that the bandit leader would most likely show himself at this moment. As expected, after the 100th bandit fell, he didn't immediately stop moving like the other small monsters. Instead, he reached into his pocket, took out something, and threw it into the sky. A sharp sound pierced through the clouds. Only then did the bandit stop breathing. All the students looked in the direction where the whistling arrow disappeared, feeling uneasy. However, no matter how powerful the bandit leader was, he wouldn't just drop from the sky. Gu Fei was currently on high alert, paying attention to the deeper parts of the valley. Not long after, the rumbling of footsteps came from the valley. The students were shocked when they heard the sound. This sound didn't sound like the sound of a single person. "Quick! Close combat students, take the front, priests, the back, archers and sorcerers, the sides. A hurriedly commanded the formation to face the enemy. Unexpectedly, Gu Fei casually walked to the front and waved his hand at the students. All of you, move to the side. Ah! The students looked at each other. Gu Fei had already turned his back to them. With one hand in his pocket, he faced the rumbling footsteps alone. Teacher. A hurriedly came over. It sounds like there are a lot of enemies. Yes, so all of you move to the side first. Gu Fei said. The previous bandits didn't just send out 100 of them to fight against the students. In reality, the total number of bandits on the scene was less than 10. The students of the Ultimate Class 3 had killed them repeatedly and finally accumulated to 100 people. But now, from the sounds coming from the valley, it really seemed like over 100 mountain bandits were charging out at the same time. If it was really this number, the Ultimate Class 3 had no chance of winning. AFA was hoping that there wouldn't be so many enemies. The sound got closer and clearer. It didn't sound like it was amplified by the echoes of the valley. It was real, the sound of footsteps. The silhouettes became clearer and clearer from the depths of the valley. AFA's face was already ashen. He stretched out his hand and shouted at the students, "Retreat, retreat, hurry." Normally, AFA was just a leader being ordered around, but he was still the most skilled player in the group. The others wouldn't doubt his judgment, and they immediately retreated to the exit of the valley. After running a few steps, everyone suddenly thought of something. They turned around and saw that Gu Fei was still standing in the same spot. He didn't move at all. "Teacher!" the students shouted. Gu Fei had already focused all his attention on this group of bandits. It should be known that it was absolutely impossible for an ordinary player to have such a dense group of monsters for them to grind in a leveling area. Even if they deliberately lured monsters, such a large number of monsters would seriously exceed the limit. No one would ever lure so many monsters. Gu Fei already had a premonition that he would have to go on a killing spree. He was extremely excited. He only heard AFA's shout and didn't take it to heart. At this moment, all the students shouted for teacher. Gu Fei turned around and saw that everyone was already 20 meters away from him. He nodded and said, "Yes, it's better to stay further away. It's safer." "No way?" All the students looked at each other. They could already tell that Gu Fei had no intention of retreating. It seemed like he wanted to fight to the end with these bandits. At this moment, Gu Fei had already pulled out the night streamer. AFA's eyes lit up. He could tell that this glowing weapon was definitely a top-grade weapon. Teacher hadn't used a weapon before this. AFA thought for a while and guessed that teacher was afraid that the damage would be too high and kill the monsters directly. Could it be that teacher has a high damage spell that can instantly kill the bandits here? AFA made the correct deduction. He couldn't even close his mouth. The other students already didn't know what to do. They were waiting for AFA, who had the most experience in the game, to make a decision. Let's wait and see. AFA wanted to see if Gu Fei really had the ability to instantly kill the bandits, given how confident he was. If he really had such power, it wouldn't be a dream to annihilate this large group of reinforcements. Gu Fei held the night streamer in a reverse grip. He didn't wait for the bandits to reach him. Instead, he took the initiative to charge forward. Under AFA's nervous anticipation, he didn't even use any area of effect spells. He just charged forward faster and faster. He actually killed his way into the group of bandits. So he's going to commit suicide? All the students were confused. Murderous sounds filled the air. The bandits were tough. More importantly, they were simulated by the system. They wouldn't feel any throat fatigue at all. Once the battle started, not only were their hands not satisfied, they even howled like ghosts and howled like wolves. The game producers proudly called this sound effects. Gu Fei, who charged forward, immediately used dual flame flash and instantly killed 4 bandits. However, his main goal was to use this spell to attract the bandits' aggro so that they wouldn't ignore him and charge toward the students. This strategy was extremely successful. The aggro range of a sorcerer's spells was relatively large. With a wave of Gu Fei's hand, a group of bandits surrounded him. Gu Fei didn't panic at all. He had long practiced with the bandits in the Cloud Valley. He was familiar with their attack patterns. The system's attack patterns had always been the same. This kind of attack pattern had already been thoroughly understood by Gu Fei. If they wanted to hurt Gu Fei, they could only wait for him to be distracted and make a mistake. However, Gu Fei didn't plan to tangle with these robots for too long. He pointed his sword at his feet. 1,000 layers of inferno, rise. It naturally took some time to activate. The good thing about the system's idiocy was that it didn't dodge even after hearing Gu Fei's incantation. It would still stubbornly charge toward Gu Fei's side. With Gu Fei as the center, the bandits were tightly united, not leaving any space for each other. Gu Fei held a sword in his right hand and a saber in his left. He parried attacks from all directions while calculating the time. It's about time. Gu Fei's heart moved. He pointed his finger outwards. Teleportation, move. In the eyes of the students, Gu Fei had already been surrounded by the bandits, leaving no room for escape. Afa felt that there was no hope and was about to call for everyone to escape first. Suddenly, there was a flash in front of his eyes. Gu Fei's figure flashed outside the group of bandits. At the same time, the 1,000 layers of inferno released from the group of bandits started burning rapidly. The well-behaved system bandits formed a dense circle around Gu Fei's position. It was practically a match made in heaven with the 1,000 layers of inferno. The sound effect was still the same, but the bandits had all fallen. Gu Fei put away his weapon and walked toward the students. He clapped his hands and said, "All right, that's all for today. Prepare to end class." Chapter 234. The students were naturally deeply shocked, and they couldn't speak for a long time. The fire was still burning behind him. Gu Fei shouted, "Gather up, prepare to return to the city." The students ran to stand in line in front of Gu Fei. The more skilled they were, the more they felt that Gu Fei's strength was incomprehensible. Afa was the most shocked one. But as the students clicked their tongues, he couldn't help but remind, "Teacher, the quest requires us to capture the bandit leader alive." Capture him alive? How do we do that? Gu Fei was slightly stunned. Suddenly, he saw the terrified expressions on the students' faces. Some of them had already started to scream, "Teacher, be careful." But this warning was too late. The boss's skills were extraordinary, and he was very fast. Gu Fei's 1,000 layers of flames instantly killed the normal bandits, but it couldn't kill the bandit leader mixed in with the other bandits. As Gu Fei was organizing his team, the bandit leader had already come out of the fire. His aggro was obviously on Gu Fei, and he raised his sword and slashed at him. Although the system NPCs were rigid, they didn't have killing intent. Killing intent was a mysterious system. It was only after the holographic simulation system completely replicated the complex parameters of the human body that it could simulate every detail. And NPCs were completely made up of data. They weren't as detailed as the real human body. In short, he didn't have killing intent. The sound of the fire behind him covered the sound of the bandit leader's leap. By the time the students realized what was going on, the bandit leader had already flown behind Gu Fei. Gu Fei didn't even turn his head. He wanted to dodge, but it was already too late. The bandit leader swung his sword at Gu Fei's waist, sending him flying. "Teacher!" The students screamed. There were clerics among them, and they hurriedly cast healing spells at Gu Fei. No matter how strong the boss was, it was just a normal attack. It wasn't enough to instantly kill a player. Gu Fei's life was already in danger, but he was quickly saved with the help of so many students. Afa shouted. "Flash what?" Gu Fei supported himself against the cliff and stood up. His expression was calm as he raised his hand and drew out the Night Streamer sword. Regeneration was not an attack skill, but it could also be converted into aggro based on its recovery effect. Similar to mage spells, the aggro range of this skill was very large. Under normal circumstances, these priests would probably have drawn the bandit leader's aggro to them with their healing spells. But at this time, the bandit leader strode towards Gu Fei. In fact, it was because Gu Fei's magic damage was amazing. The targets he attacked were generally killed instantly. Only the boss could withstand it, so there was no need to worry about aggro at this time. The bandit leader rushed in front of him and chopped down with his sword. In the eyes of the students, this slash was fast and fierce. They hoped that their teacher wouldn't be cut into pieces. They hurriedly cast healing spells on Gu Fei. Unexpectedly, Gu Fei had already dodged the attack by moving his body to the side. He raised his sword in a backhand motion and chanted, chopping down the bandit leader, causing sparks to fly in all directions. Just like that, the two sides slashed back and forth. At first, the students were still a little worried. From time to time, they would cry out, "Teacher, be careful." The priests were even more nervous. When they saw the bandit sword about to fall, they trembled and cast healing spells at Gu Fei. As for the other melee professions, they also wanted to help, but they felt that this battle was too fierce and there was no place for them to intervene. The ranged professions also didn't have confidence in themselves. In the chaotic battle, the two of them weren't sure that their attacks wouldn't hit Gu Fei. In contrast, Gu Fei, who was in the middle of the battle, was the calmest. Previously, the bandit leader had been able to attack successfully because the system NPCs didn't have killing intent. Now that they were fighting face to face, Gu Fei wasn't at a disadvantage. After all, the bandit leader was just an enhanced version of the bandit's attack routine. He was faster and had stronger attacks. He didn't have any crafty or strange moves. However, Gu Fei was still constantly on guard. Based on his previous experience fighting the boss, Suo 2, the boss should have a killer move. It was like a normal player's skill, and it would be more powerful than a normal attack. Gu Fei was constantly on guard, but the bandit leader still didn't use his killer move. Gradually, he started to feel uneasy. On the other hand, the students were already relaxed. The priests weren't nervous anymore. The attackers didn't want to help either. Even Fa changed his lines. "Teacher, slow down. Don't kill him. I want him alive." "How do I do that?" Gu Fei was depressed. He hated being merciful the most. The mission didn't say anything. Fa was also confused. The mission only said to capture the bandit leader alive. It didn't say under what conditions he would be captured. Find a rope to tie him up? The students started to use their imagination. Knock him out. No one knows how to use sap. Sap was a skill only level 36 bandits had. The highest level in Ultimate Class 3, Fa, was only level 34. At this moment, Gu Fei, who was fighting in the field, felt that the boss's skills were starting to weaken. Gu Fei had already used up all his mana. That was why he had been fighting for so long. If he could use double flame flash every time, he would have killed the boss long ago. The battle didn't last long. Just as Gu Fei was about to stab the bandit leader suddenly knelt on the ground and shouted his surrender. "That's how we capture him alive." The students roared with laughter and started discussing. Gu Fei also felt that it was funny. He didn't stab the bandit leader anymore. Instead, he retracted the sword and looked at Fa. "Is this enough?" Fa nodded happily. "Bring him back to Cloud City and hand him over to the dungeon. Then, the mission will be complete." Gu Fei nodded. Just as he was about to say something, the bandit leader, who was already kneeling on the ground, suddenly rushed forward. He instantly picked up the large steel sword that had been thrown in front of him and swung it at Gu Fei. The speed of this attack was even faster than before. Gu Fei was shocked, but his reaction wasn't for show. With a flick of his wrist, his sword was already at his side, blocking the attack. Unexpectedly, the bandit leader's attack didn't stop immediately. Instead, it continued to push Gu Fei's sword toward his chest in violation of the system's attack rules. In his shock, Gu Fei used his other hand to push the sword, but he still couldn't stop the momentum of the opponent's attack. In the blink of an eye, the bandit leader's sword had already reached Gu Fei's chest. Gu Fei's HP began to drop. What was worse was that the sword was still pressing forward. The bandit leader didn't seem to have any intention of retreating. An aura that wanted to push Gu Fei to the ground spread around him. Gu Fei hurriedly took large steps back. This bandit leader actually continued to press forward in Gu Fei's footsteps. His strength was shocking. Gu Fei had already embarked on the path of fighting force with force. There was no way he could use tricks to resolve this. After a few steps back, he reached the cliff of the valley. Gu Fei's back was pressed against the stone wall behind him. He pushed the sword with both hands and struggled to hold on. However, the bandit leader's expression was ferocious. He didn't show any signs of letting up. How frustrating! Gu Fei was infuriated. He had always been on guard against the boss's ultimate move, but he didn't think that the boss' ultimate move was not an attack, but a feigned surrender. Which motherfucker came up with this? Gu Fei cursed in his heart, but there was nothing he could do. Strength was his absolute weakness. At this time, because he couldn't withstand the opponent's attack, his HP continued to drop. How could he escape? Fortunately, this wasn't Gu Fei fighting alone. The students were stunned by the sudden change in the situation. By the time they reacted, Gu Fei had already been pressed against the mountain wall. The students shouted for their teacher, and one by one, they helped out. Some healed, some attacked, all without a care for their own safety. The bandit leader displayed the usual single-minded spirit of a system product. He ignored the arrows, daggers, knives, and axes coming at him from behind. He just wanted to push Gu Fei down to the bottom of the cliff. Gu Fei was shocked by his stubbornness. However, at this time, the clerics among the students worked together. Gu Fei's HP was no longer dropping. Instead, it was being recovered by the clerics. No matter how stubborn the bandit leader was, it was useless. At this time, he was still being attacked by the students behind him. It was only a matter of time before he fell. With Gu Fei holding on with all his might, the clerics healing him, and the other students attacking with all their might, the bandit leader finally lost his strength and collapsed to the ground. This time, Gu Fei didn't dare to be careless. He first ate some fruits to replenish his mana. Then he advanced with full vigilance. He stabbed with his sword and kicked with his feet. The bandit leader didn't retaliate fiercely. He only looked at the people around him with lifeless eyes. Gu Fei still had a lingering fear. He asked if this should be enough, right? When it came to online games, he felt that he might not be as good as his students. Although AFA was considered experienced, his experience in this parallel world's holographic online game couldn't compare to Gu Fei's. He couldn't explain anything. In the end, the group of low-level students was still brave. Their levels were low anyway. Even if they died and lost a level, it wouldn't be a big loss. A few of them went forward together, took out a long rope from somewhere, and tied the bandit leader up like a dumpling. The bandit leader didn't react at all during this process. Only then did everyone relax. It looked like this mission was going to be a success. The tied-up bandit leader was picked up like luggage by 2 soldier students. The students cheered and prepared to return to the city. Gu Fei, who had almost been killed, was now full of energy. He continued to order the students to line up neatly. It was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over their heads. The students who were in high spirits immediately bowed down. However, they did not dare to disobey their teacher's orders and could only obediently form up again. Under AFA's command, they marched in the direction of Cloud City in an orderly manner. They didn't know that at the entrance of the valley, there was already someone waiting for their arrival. Chapter 235. The students of Ultimate Class 3 marched through the valley with orderly and powerful steps. There were no outsiders here, so they didn't feel as ashamed as before. The arrogance of defeating the boss began to rise. Gu Fei shook his head and smiled bitterly at the back of the group. In the end, they were still a group of kids. It would be difficult to make them feel embarrassed. As they marched to the entrance of the valley, they ran into a group of people who were about to charge into the valley. The students lined up neatly, reflecting their near-perfect discipline, causing this team of 27 people to involuntarily feel ashamed. When they saw the bandit leader who was tied up tightly by 2 of the warriors, the expressions of the 27 people became unnatural. So it's like this. Many people whispered to each other. But among the 27 people, there were 4 who didn't make a sound. They didn't show any strange emotions towards the bandits tied up. An expression of, as expected, flashed across their faces. Then, they continued to be surprised because of the orderly formation of the team in front of them. A disciplined team would undoubtedly have more fighting strength, especially in a team battle. But in the game, no team would go so far as to use the word discipline. For a team with outstanding fighting strength, people would at most praise them with pretty good teamwork. Teamwork came from tacit understanding. It was easy for 3 to 5 people to understand each other and form a tacit understanding, but it wasn't so easy for 30 to 50 people or even 100 people. At this time, tacit understanding had to be forcefully displayed. This tacit understanding was called discipline. Obeying discipline was undoubtedly a painful thing. In the game, where entertainment was the main focus, no one would be willing to obey. So when they saw a disciplined team appear in front of them, it was truly shocking. This kind of team would definitely be extremely strong. Everyone subconsciously thought to themselves. In the game, there was obviously a more direct and simple method to determine one's fighting strength: appraisal. These 27 people couldn't help but choose their targets to appraise. After confirming the results, they were shocked. This team didn't even have a level 35 player. Moreover, after seeing these 27 people, this team suddenly became dispirited. Their footsteps also seemed very lazy. They didn't have the same neat and powerful luster as when they first saw them. Of course, when these students saw that there were outsiders, they immediately felt embarrassed. Many people's faces were already filled with joy, but the students had already brushed past them and left the valley. The 27 of them looked at each other questioningly. Finally, one of them looked at the 4 people who had been very calm. "Shall we make our move?" One of the 4 said quietly, "You guys can decide for yourselves. However, since the quest you triggered is a two-way quest, then our reward will need to be doubled. After all, this is a PK battle, and we still need to pay for future troubles." "We know that." The person who asked the question nodded. After a brief discussion with the remaining 22 people, he turned back and said, "But these opponents don't seem to be very strong. Perhaps we don't need your help?" The 4 of them didn't get angry. They just smiled and said, "He really isn't that strong. However, even though we won't take action, we won't refund the deposit either. However, you won't have to pay the follow-up fees. I hope you understand." Of course, the person who asked the question nodded. "But we'll be here. If you need help, we'll help. Is that okay?" The 4 of them had clearly read the intentions of the people in front of them. This was undoubtedly a very satisfactory answer for the other party. Finally, the other party didn't say anything else. They turned back and muttered a few words to the other 22 people. Each of them quietly took out their weapons and suddenly launched a surprise attack on the students of the Ultimate Class 3 from behind. Arrows. The first to arrive were always the arrows of the archers. The target was the extra person at the end of the enemy formation. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the person suddenly turned around and pulled out a long sword from his pocket. He swung the sword a few times and actually blocked the arrows that were shot at him at the same time. "What are you guys trying to do?" Gu Fei had long felt that there was something wrong with these 20 people. When the arrows attacked just now, the safest way was to dodge them. However, he was afraid that they would hit the students, so he could only take the risk and block them with his sword. Fortunately, the other party didn't use any skills, and the 4 arrows were successfully blocked by Gu Fei. It seemed that they just thought that shooting a mage didn't require any powerful skills. Black robes and a dark purple long sword. This attire immediately attracted the attention of the 4 people who had been very calm this whole time. Although this was the first time they had seen this attire, it was one of the hottest topics recently. This person was the mage of the child elite group, Qianli Drunk. He was the opponent that their Black Hand mercenary group needed to pay attention to in the finals. When the 4 people recognized Gu Fei, they felt a little relieved. Previously, they had been surprised that these guys who weren't even level 35 could deal with the boss here. Now that they looked at it, it turned out that they had also hired the mercenary group to help them. However, the child elite group actually only sent out 1 person. It seemed that they were really strong. At this moment, the students had already realized what was going on. They all turned around to ask what was going on. Sorry, it's a two-way quest, the leader of the 23 people who had launched the attack calmly explained. Two-way quest. Gu Fei had heard of this term before. According to Brother Yu's explanation, the system would set some opposing content as two-way quests that could be accepted by players from both sides. In the two-way quests, the main enemy that the players faced was not the system but the players. Two-way quests were usually guild quests or group quests. It was rare to see individual quests. What's the content of your quest? Gu Fei asked. Since they were all doing quests, there was no right or wrong. It would be best if there was a peaceful solution. Kill the bandit leader who is being escorted, the other party replied. They were actually just a small guild. After receiving this quest, they felt that they didn't have much confidence in dealing with a boss-level opponent. As such, they quickly contacted the largest mercenary group in Cloud City, the Black Hand Mercenary Group. The Black Hand Mercenary Group had a good reputation among the players. It could be said that their credibility was guaranteed. Those who sought their help wouldn't issue quests in the mercenary building. Although it was safe to issue quests through the system, it was inevitable that the system god would deduct the so-called intermediary fee. As such, as long as it was someone they could trust, everyone was happy to trade in private. In a few words, the price was negotiated. The two sides met at the city gate. After paying the deposit, they set off in the direction indicated by the system. Then, they met Gu Fei and the Ultimate Class 3 at the entrance of the valley. Only then did they find out that the person in charge of escorting the bandit leader was also a player. This was a two-way quest. When Gu Fei heard the other party's quest content, he silently cursed the system for being despicable. The Ultimate Class 3 wanted to capture him alive, but the other party wanted to kill him. There was no leeway at all. It was clear that they wanted to fight to the death. Sorry, our quest is to capture him alive, Gu Fei said. Of course, it's a two-way quest. I believe you guys have the same content, the other party replied. At this moment, someone who had used identification on Gu Fei whispered in the team, "This guy is level 40. Be careful." Well, a level 40 player who established a small guild and then recruited some new people. The players of the small guild didn't know Gu Fei's identity, so they all thought so. How do we deal with this? Gu Fei sighed. We won't give up the quest. The other party was very determined. Gu Fei looked back at the students and smiled. Of course we won't either. If that's the case. The other party all drew their weapons. Their intentions were already very clear. Is there no other way? Gu Fei thought back to the one-on-one system when they competed for the leveling area. The problem was that there wasn't a leveling area, so they could find another one. If they missed this quest, they wouldn't be able to find it again. Although two-way quests were very controversial, the system shut the players' mouths with generous rewards. Almost no one who really received a two-way quest felt embarrassed. Instead, they all felt lucky. It was absolutely impossible to give up so easily. When this small guild discovered that the quest was a two-way quest, he was already excited enough. When he discovered that his opponent was also very weak, he became even more excited. At this moment, how could he possibly back down? When Gu Fei said, "other ways," they didn't even think about it. The four people from the Black Hand Mercenary Group walked forward and asked the leader of the small guild, "Are you sure you don't want to help?" The small guild leader looked back in confusion. "This is Qianli Drunk. Haven't you heard of this name before?" The Black Hand Mercenary Group member briefly introduced Gu Fei. Ah! Everyone was stunned. Gu Fei's identity was only recently exposed, but his legend had been around for a long time. He was indisputably regarded as the strongest person in Cloud City. I heard that wherever this person points his sword at, the opponent will be instantly turned into ashes. His attack power is so strong that it's like a relative of the system. I heard that 20 to 30 people are nothing in front of him. Against drinking and singing, 750 people will be annihilated as well. The destructive power of rumors was this strong. The small guild members were all talking about Gu Fei. The excitement from before was no longer there. They felt that it was unfair for them to meet such a strong opponent. The four people from the Black Hand Mercenary Group stepped forward. The person in front smiled at Gu Fei. I didn't think we would meet like this before the match. Or you? Gu Fei obviously didn't know these people. I'm called Solitude Under the Moon. The person replied. We are from the Black Hand mercenary group. Chapter 236. Black Hand Mercenary Group. Hearing this name, Gu Fei couldn't help but take a second look at them. After all, this was the Child Elite Group's opponent in the finals. From their attire, it could be seen that the other party was a cleric, while the other three were a warrior, a thief, and a mage. Compared to the cowardly look of the people from the small guild when they found out that Gu Fei was the one who had insta-killed the mage 1,000 miles drunk, the four of them were much more confident. At the same time, Gu Fei also deduced their intentions and said to the person from the small guild, You hired a mercenary group to help? It seems like you guys are determined to complete this quest and won't back down? Aren't you guys the same? The other party replied. Gu Fei looked back at the students and smiled bitterly. He had brought these students to complete the quest, and he still had to give them equipment later. How did he look like a mercenary? Seeing that the other party wasn't willing to back down, Gu Fei was straightforward. He took out the night streamer and pointed it forward. If that's the case, then I won't hold back. Dual flame flash. Seeing that the other party wasn't willing to back down, Gu Fei was straightforward. He took out the night streamer and pointed it forward. If that's the case, then I won't hold back. Dual flame flash. Gu Fei swung the sword to his left and right. The two thieves had a look of shock on their faces as they disappeared from sight. I have anti-stealth equipment, don't. Gu Fei was about to use a reason that players could understand to remind the thieves not to be so senseless when he suddenly heard a scream from behind him. I have anti-stealth equipment, don't. Gu Fei was about to use a reason that players could understand to remind the thieves not to be so senseless when he suddenly heard a scream from behind him. It turned out that a thief had carefully snuck into the group of students to try and kill the seemingly dying bandit leader. In the end, he accidentally bumped into a student and immediately revealed himself. This immediately proved that Gu Fei's kind reminder was a lie. Don't you have anti-stealth equipment? You didn't even notice that he had snuck into your group. What are you bragging about? However, Gu Fei had clearly killed the two thieves who had snuck up to him. Everyone fell into a state of deep contemplation. How could there be any suspense about the thief who was trapped in the crowd? He tried his best to escape from the encirclement. The students were not to be trifled with. More than 20 of them worked together and ruthlessly dealt with this fellow. Although he died a horrible death, his ending was much better than the other two thieves who were instantly killed by Gu Fei. This was because Ultimate Class 3 and the opposing guild were in a two-way quest. Only one party could succeed, and the other party would definitely fail. Moreover, the solution to the problem was usually to fight. The system also didn't want to force players too hard, so during the two-way quest period, there were other rules for the PK punishment between the two sides. Players who died in this PK battle wouldn't directly lose a level. Instead, they would lose 20% of the experience they needed to level up. Moreover, both sides wouldn't gain any PK points. However, Gu Fei didn't belong to any part of this two-way quest, so when he fought with anyone on the opposing side, it was a normal PK. The two thieves he had just killed had already lost a level. At the same time, Gu Fei also had 2 PK points. On the other hand, the Black Hand mercenary group situation was exactly the same as Gu Fei's. If they had received this quest through the system's official channels, they could also enter the two-way quest and enjoy the special PK rules. However, as foreign mercenaries, they would suffer a 30% drop in level penalty. But now, both sides were going through a private transaction, so of course they wouldn't receive the system's protection. The small guild had already lost 3 people in an instant. Ultimate Class 3's morale was greatly boosted, and they were clamoring to take down the other party in one fell swoop. What's with the noise? Gu Fei turned around and shouted. The students instantly fell silent. Line up, return to the city. Gu Fei said. Ah. The students were shocked. I'll take care of this, Gu Fei said solemnly. Teacher. The students were touched. They didn't know that PK was actually their teacher's ultimate hobby, so they naturally refused to leave their teacher behind. Gu Fei had no other choice. He couldn't just let the students die and return to the city with a big move. He could only say helplessly, "Then step aside. Teacher will give you a PK lesson." Hearing that, the students' scalps went numb and their faces darkened. "I'll show you teacher's kung fu." Gu Fei had long wanted to personally demonstrate to the students that he really knew kung fu. Unfortunately, he didn't have the chance to do so in real life. "It's over, Teacher Gu Fei has gone crazy again," the students whispered. "Teacher really knows kung fu," Fa said solemnly to the students. "It's over, Fa has gone crazy too. Is it because playing in a parallel world for too long will cause mental problems?" There was a lot of discussion. This time, it was Gu Fei's turn to be speechless. However, he had no choice but to speak the truth. He took 2 steps forward in a very imposing manner, looking for a target to attack. "Looks like we can only solve this by fighting?" Monologue was still smiling. He had already carefully studied the composition of the other party. Other than Gu Fei, the other 24 people looked very young. He was very curious about what kind of team this was. But no matter what, he had already realized that the only opponent was Gu Fei. The rest of the children could be easily dealt with. "Hurry up and attack." The people from the small guild didn't move. They all looked at Monologue and the other 3. Gu Fei was undoubtedly a ruthless character. Moreover, if they were killed by him, they would lose a level. The people from the small guild all felt that the money spent on the Black Hand mercenary group couldn't be spent in vain. Against Gu Fei, of course, Monologue and the other 3 had to go up. As for them, they were prepared to bully the group of children while Monologue and the other 3 were entangled with Gu Fei. Their ultimate goal was to complete the quest, so they didn't actually need to kill many people. They just needed to break up the enemy's formation and get rid of the bandit leader they were protecting. After that, the quest could be declared a success. Whether or not they would continue fighting depended on the enemy's reaction. However, Gu Fei was already on guard against this plan of theirs. The main goal of this PK was for the sake of the students. Gu Fei gave up on his favorite to fly into the crowd and fight in close combat. He raised the night streamer in his hand and chanted a skyfall fire wheel and a flaming 3,000 layers flames. Dodging Gu Fei's spells was simply a psychological game. When people heard his chants and scattered, they would always find that nothing had happened. However, when they were hesitantly standing still, they would suddenly find that flames had already ignited above them or below them. This was especially true for people who were fighting him for the first time. They would always suffer this kind of loss. This time, the players who ran in the direction that Gu Fei had set up were instantly turned to ash. "Good." The students clapped happily. Gu Fei's gaze fell on Monologue and the other 3. These 4 were truly experts. Just now, Gu Fei had included them in his calculations, but the 4 of them had easily dodged Gu Fei's spells. This was actually quite easy to accomplish. All they needed to do was understand Gu Fei's characteristics. When Gu Fei chanted, they didn't need to nervously run away. Once they saw where he was attacking, they could slowly move away. That way, they would still be able to make it in time. That was how they had been able to easily dodge Gu Fei's area of effect spells back then. These 4 can only be dealt with in close combat, Gu Fei thought to himself. He immediately rushed forward. "Brother Qianli, you can only cast 1 more spell now, right?" the other said with a smile. "You guys are quite knowledgeable." Gu Fei sighed in admiration. Previously, he had dealt with 2 thieves with dual flame flash. Now that he had 2 area of effect spells, Gu Fei could only use this kind of power once more. "There are so many of us. How are you going to deal with us?" Monologue laughed. "That's my forte." As Gu Fei spoke, he charged towards the man. "Ice tornado." The opposing mage finally took action. With a wave of his staff, an ice tornado swept out, circling in front of Monologue and sweeping towards Gu Fei. As a priest, Monologue naturally couldn't stand on the front lines. He immediately retreated. The warrior and thief flanked him from the left and right, forming a 3-pronged attack on Gu Fei. When the three attacks were about to reach Gu Fei, they appeared to come first and then later. Gu Fei originally wanted to use dual flame flash to kill the two mages and nullify the ice tornado, but his opponents didn't give him the opportunity. It was clear that the Black Hand mercenary group had a deep understanding of Gu Fei. Gu Fei retreated a few steps, but his opponent still hadn't joined forces to advance forward. Gu Fei changed the direction of his sword and suddenly used teleportation. With a whoosh, he appeared in front of the mage. However, the other side seemed to have expected this. They didn't panic in the slightest. Monologue cast a heal on the mage and laughed. Teleport? If that's the case, you won't have any mana left, will you? Gu Fei simply smiled. He slashed out with his sword. He didn't attack the mage, but rather struck his staff. The mage cried out. He clearly didn't expect Gu Fei to do something like this. Ice Tornado was a spell that could be controlled over time. Originally, he was controlling it to attack Gu Fei, but when Gu Fei flew in front of him and hit his staff instead of attacking anyone else, the Ice Tornado that was guided by the staff immediately fell to the side and floated towards the warrior who was just fighting with it. Gu Fei turned around and raised his sword again. Lightning, descend. A bolt of lightning instantly struck down. The thief was struck head-on and instantly killed on the spot. Gu Fei gazed at Monologue and smiled. I still have a bit of mana left. He then switched the Night Streak to his left hand and drew Baptism of Flames with his right. He slashed at the mage. Monologue hurriedly raised his staff to cast a heal, but Gu Fei unexpectedly stabbed him with his sword. Although it didn't deal any damage, it interrupted his heal chant. You still have mana? Can you cast a spell? Gu Fei laughed. At this moment, the mage had already been struck twice. Chapter 237. One of the two attacks was an enchantment, which was in line with Gu Fei's 50% chance to enchant fire spells. Of course, players nowadays weren't so easy to kill. Gu Fei sped up his attacks on the mage while making sure to interrupt Monologue's recover. As for the warrior, his movement speed was slow to begin with. Now that he was hit by the mage's ice tornado, a distance of 2 to 3 meters was more than enough for him to crawl, let alone 5 meters away. Of course, Monologue wasn't that stupid. He was too close, and Gu Fei could interrupt his recover with a single wave of his hand. Recover wasn't a skill that could only be used at close range. Monologue hurriedly retreated a few steps and raised his staff, preparing to cast another spell. Hey! Gu Fei shouted. Monologue saw a blur in front of him, and Gu Fei actually threw the fire baptism in his right hand at him. Monologue hadn't retreated very far when he was struck in the head, interrupting his cast. Gu Fei switched his sword to his right hand and stabbed the mage twice. The pitiful mage could only take a beating from behind after getting close to Gu Fei. He was counting on Monologue's recover, but there was no sign of it. At this moment, Gu Fei's luck was off the charts. The Dark Moonstream sword was a critical hit and an enchantment. In addition, Gu Fei's physical attack power was quite good. After 2 attacks, the mage looked at Solitude under the moonlight with extreme resentment and died just like that. At this moment, the warrior finally slowly closed in 2 meters. He lowered his head and used charge. Gu Fei leapt to the side and swung his sword at Solitude under the moonlight. Without protection, the priest was as pitiful as the mage. Gu Fei hooked his foot and picked up the fire baptism from the ground. He held a sword in one hand and a blade in the other, attacking Monologue regardless of whether or not there was an attack. Even his legs weren't idle. From time to time, he would kick Monologue. It was Monologue's fault for attacking at the wrong time. Gu Fei usually wouldn't be so bold in PvP. He wouldn't waste time on attacks that didn't deal any damage. But right now, he was going to demonstrate Kung Fu to the students. Soliloquy under the moonlight had become the perfect sacrifice, and he was forced to retreat by Gu Fei. On the other side, the warrior was also on the verge of tears. The ice whirlwind effect on his body had yet to be dispelled. Seeing that Gu Fei was getting further and further away from Solitude under the moonlight, the warrior wanted to rush over and help, but his speed was simply too slow. In his heart, he cursed at how many pieces of equipment this mage had used to strengthen his ice whirlwind. The effect actually lasted for so long. It was a pity that Solitude Under the Moon, a cleric with no combat abilities, was beaten to death by Gu Fei just like that. The most infuriating thing was that Gu Fei even smiled at him before he left. See you in the competition. By the time the attack was over, the warrior had finally dispelled the freezing effect. But the problem was that if Gu Fei didn't need to face the enemy, what could he do with his speed? Gu Fei circled around him and went straight for the students. When the Black Hands Quartet was being bullied by Gu Fei, the people from the small guild didn't come to help at all. Instead, they risked their lives to bully the students. However, after suffering from one of Gu Fei's spells, they were now at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. The students gritted their teeth and fought back. After sacrificing 3 people, they were completely defeated in just a short period of time. I'm coming! Gu Fei shouted and pointed his sword at the sky. 1,000 layers of flames of the fire tree, rise, wheel of fire from the heavens, descend. This time, Gu Fei's chant was as loud as a bell, and his enunciation was clear. When the people from the small guild heard that he was going to cast another spell, they learned their lesson this time. They didn't immediately run away in panic, and they wanted to find the direction that Gu Fei's sword was pointing at. Gu Fei didn't use any tricks and steadily pointed them in a direction. Everyone hurriedly dodged in that direction. Although they heard the conversation between Gu Fei and Soliloquy Under the Moon, it seemed that he didn't have any mana left, but in the end he turned around and killed a person with a lightning strike. When he turned around to attack, it seemed that his dual flame flash was also flashing. It had to be known that this was an instant kill of a mage. No one dared to put their lives on the line to bet on whether or not Gu Fei still had mana left. In the end, with this flash, they fell into a trap. Gu Fei had long since used up his mana after that lightning strike. The players from the small guild were only paying attention to how terrifying Gu Fei was, and the students seized the opportunity to bombard them with spells and arrows. Although the power wasn't great, one wave still caused the other side's health to drop severely. The students shouted and swarmed forward. As Gu Fei rushed over, he anxiously shouted, "Aya, leave a few for me. Teacher, watch us." The students still thought that Gu Fei was worried for them, so they shouted bravely and killed even harder. They really didn't understand Teacher Gu Fei's true intentions at all. At this moment, Gu Fei didn't care about being a teacher anymore. He rolled up his sleeves and rushed into the chaotic battle to fight with the students. The students were still advancing orderly, but Gu Fei was rushing in a straight line toward the enemy's core. Fa was so anxious that he shouted from behind, "Teacher, come out, I'm about to release a spell." "Release it, release it. Release it and I'll dodge again," Gu Fei shouted. So Fa waved his hand and cast Heavenly Fire Wheel. But Gu Fei, who was inside the circle, had no intention of leaving. He continued to attack in all directions, forcing many people to not have time to dodge the Heavenly Fire Wheel. The fire wheel descended. Gu Fei was in the middle of it. The players from the small guild were already at a critical point, and after being hit by this spell, they were instantly wiped out. Gu Fei did a quick count. There were still 7 people left. Fa shouted from behind, "Teacher, why aren't you dodging?" Gu Fei turned around and glanced at him. He couldn't help but say in disdain, "What are you dodging? Do you think you're me?" The students roared with laughter. Indeed, Fa's spell damage was on a completely different level from Gu Fei's. If Gu Fei didn't dodge the Heavenly Fire Wheel, he might just return to the city. Fa's spell definitely couldn't be killed instantly. As long as he didn't feel the pain of losing this bit of health, it was no big deal to take it head-on. Gu Fei raised his sword and another person died. He asked the remaining 6, "What do you think? Let's forget about it?" The guild leader of the small guild had already died in the chaotic battle. At this moment, none of the 6 could make a decision. They didn't know what to say. Gu Fei glanced in another direction. The Black Hand mercenary group's warrior was already standing still. He was an expert. His ability to judge the situation was still relatively high. With just a comparison, he knew that his side had no chance of winning. If they continued fighting, they wouldn't be able to complete the mission. If they died, they would even lose a level. We're just doing a mission. There's no need to be so ruthless. You guys go. Gu Fei waved his hand generously. The 6 of them looked at each other. After exchanging glances with the Black Hand Mercenary Group's warrior, they didn't know what to say. The 7 of them lowered their heads and retreated together. He turned back to look at the students. They were so excited that their faces were flushed with excitement after winning the battle. They were arguing about how well they performed in the battle just now. Stop arguing. Gu Fei put his sword back into his pocket. He raised his sword and shouted, "Where's the class monitor? Come out and form a team to return to the city." "The class monitor is dead," the students said. There wasn't a hint of sadness in their tone. They were all gloating. Gu Fei suspected that it was this bunch of brats who pushed the class monitor to the edge. Otherwise, why would they be so happy? After forming the team and counting the number of people, the students also lost 6 people. The luckier ones all died at the hands of the opposing guild. This meant that they only lost 20% of their experience. The opponents were miserable. Most of them died at the hands of Gu Fei, and they all lost levels. Especially the 3 members of the Black Hand Mercenary Group, Moonlight Solitude, and the other 2. They were all high-level players. The loss of a level was much more terrifying than the loss of low-level players. "All right, let's go back to the city." Gu Fei waved his hand. The students lined up and marched towards Cloud Peak City in an orderly fashion. At this time, they were in high spirits. The team was chattering nonstop. Through this battle, the students fully understood the philosophy of life. It's good to enjoy the shade under a big tree. If it wasn't for Teacher Gu Fei, the students would have been bullied by others for no reason. Afa was the strongest among them. Using Teacher Gu Fei's description, "Did you think you were me?" it proved that the 2 of them were not on the same level. The students were excited. This time, Gu Fei didn't pour cold water on them. He smiled and followed behind the team. Compared to the lively scene here, the people who were killed back to Cloud City didn't feel good. Of course, this was the content of a 2-way mission. The resentment of the losers was mainly about the failure to complete the mission and the loss of the battle. They generally didn't have any resentment towards their opponents. However, Moonlight Solitude and the others from the Black Hand Mercenary Group were more depressed. They didn't complete the mission for their employer. According to the rules set by the Black Hand Mercenary Group to establish their image, not only would they return the deposit, but they would also compensate with the full amount. Simply put, although the small guild failed the mission, the Black Hand Mercenary Group insured them. At this time, some compensation could be considered as consolation for their wounded hearts. As for the Black Hand Mercenary Group, they died, lost money, and even more depressing was that their 100% mission completion signboard was destroyed. Of course, they hoped to have a chance to redeem themselves. Therefore, when the leader of the small guild asked Moonlight about the refund and compensation, Moonlight Solitude couldn't help but ask, "Has the mission already shown that it failed?" "Not yet." "Then do you still want to complete it?" "Of course." "Then we'll gather people to help you do it again. The price will be the same as before. How about it?" The small guild, of course, couldn't ask for more and agreed immediately. "Go to the mercenary building and submit the employment request to our mercenary group. We'll take the system route this time." The people from the small guild hurried to go. Knowing that the mission was a 2-way mission, everyone would choose the system route. Moonlight Solitude reported in the mercenary channel. As soon as they heard that the opponent had hired the child elite group, many people from the Black Hand Mercenary Group were interested and signed up to participate in the mission. A team was reorganized in Cloud City. Chapter 238. Solitude went to the north gate of Cloud City to meet up with the other members. At the same time, he sent a faster player to the mercenary building to pick up the quest. High-level mercenary groups, other than the upper limit of the number of people, naturally had many other benefits. For example, in terms of quests, a level 1 mercenary group could only pick up 1 quest, while a level 5 mercenary group could pick up 5 quests at once. Of course, there were no restrictions on the quests that players could pick up in private. In addition, high-level mercenary groups could also set the authority for their members to pick up quests. For example, the player who picked up the quest right now was one of the people who had the authority. At the North Gate, when Solitude arrived, he saw that his mercenary group's companions were gathered together and chatting. When he saw Solitude, he immediately went up to greet them, asking them how powerful this drunkard from 1,000 miles was. When this was mentioned, Solitude felt sullen. There were rumors on the internet that Qianli's drunken could insta-kill mages and that his magic attack was so powerful. In the end, when he was dealing with the 4 of them, he only used a teleport that didn't have any attack power, and when he killed a thief with a lightning strike, it highlighted his high magic damage. As for him and the mage, they were actually killed by Gu Fei. But no matter what, the 2 major flaws of Qianli's drunken had been proven. First, he had low mana. Second, he had slow casting time. No matter how you looked at it, these 2 major flaws were fatal to a mage, and they were very, very fatal. However, this guy had actually managed to survive until now, and had even become famous, being known as the strongest person in Cloud City. Everyone felt that their brains were a bit insufficient. Come, everyone, come up with a plan. Solitude gathered everyone to come up with a plan. What's so difficult about it? Slow casting time means easy to dodge. He also has low mana, so of course we'll lure him to cast spells. Once his mana is exhausted, what's the point of his magic damage? Someone said disdainfully. This was indeed a very correct plan. When Solitude and the others were in the valley, they actually came up with this plan. It was just that they didn't expect Gu Fei to still be so strong in close combat after losing his mana. However, Solitude under the moonlight felt that the main reason he had failed was because he hadn't expected this. If he had been prepared, he wouldn't have ended up in such a sorry state. Now that their side had added another vicious hand, and they had such a good understanding of Gu Fei, it shouldn't be a problem to take him down. At this time, the mercenary building announced that the quest had been accepted. The Black Hand Mercenary Group's mercenary quest list had appeared in the system's mercenary quest list. After waiting for a while, the guild leader of the small guild arrived at the North Gate with a few people. When he saw the Black Hand Mercenary Group's formation, he timidly asked if they had to pay more. Of course not. Previously, we underestimated our opponent's strength and caused you to suffer losses. We should apologize, said Solitaire under the moon. To be honest, their guild was really small, so small that it couldn't even compare to the Black Hand Mercenary Group. After hiring this group of people, he no longer saw himself as a consumer god. He always seemed to be a yes man and even seemed to be fawning over them. The other side's experts were so calm and reasonable, which made him feel a little flattered. Did you mention their coordinates in your quest? Soliloquy asked the members of the small guild. Their mercenary group's quest bar only showed that they were helping a certain guild complete a certain quest, not sharing the quest with the guild. For this quest, the guild members had to assassinate the bandit leader in order to complete the quest. Then, the Black Hand Mercenary Group's quest would be evaluated as completed. The final reward was only the part agreed upon with the employer, and the employer's reward had nothing to do with the mercenary. After looking at their own quest bar, the people from the small guild shook their heads. It's still the same. When the quest was issued, it showed the coordinates of the entrance to Cloud Valley. It only said that they would escort the criminal back to Cloud City from there. Although the North Gate is the closest way to that direction, they might not necessarily go that way, Solitaire said with a frown. Do you know where they will be escorted back to Cloud City? We can wait for them, someone suggested. The people from the small guild shook their heads. It only said Cloud City. Has anyone done this kind of quest before? Solitaire asked his brothers. Most of the mercenary group members were quest experts. Everyone shook their heads. According to common sense, shouldn't the criminal be sent to prison? Someone said. This is a game. Maybe it'll end when they get to the quest. Or maybe it'll end when they enter Cloud City. Everyone talked at once. The more Solitaire listened, the more he got a headache. Mercenary groups weren't big guilds, and their numbers were limited. Plus, there were only about 20 people coming to the North Gate, so they couldn't split up. Like this. Moonlight Solitaire pointed at several people, all of whom had excellent speed. You guys go out from the east, west, and north gates. Choose different routes and advance towards the coordinates of Cloud Valley. When you see them, judge their direction, and then we'll ambush them along the way. What do they look like? Someone asked. Solitaire pondered for a moment and easily summarized the characteristics of the group. One adult and a group of children. Okay. Everyone answered and immediately set off. After Solitaire gave the order, he turned to the players from the small guild and said, "Don't show your faces for now. Maybe they will recognize you. Don't expose our intentions." The group didn't say anything else. They set off at the city gate and waited for the scout to report. In the meantime, a few members of the Black Hand mercenary group who were interested in Qianli's drunkenness rushed to the north gate after hearing the news. For most of the Black Hand mercenary group members, the quest was fake. Their real goal was to see the strongest opponent that was about to arrive. After waiting for a few minutes, the scout finally reported, "I saw a group of players coming from that direction towards the north gate." "Is it an adult and a group of children?" Solitaire asked. "It's too far, I can't see it clearly." "Wait for me to get closer," the scout reported. "But this group is really neat. What are they doing?" "That's right, it's them." Solitaire was excited. "Don't get any closer. Keep an eye on them from afar. Don't let them notice us." After giving the order to the scout, Solitaire gestured to the brothers in front of him. "They're here. Let's go." "Then what about us?" The people from the small guild were confused. They weren't sure if the Black Hand mercenary group was still helping them with the quest. "You guys don't need to go. Wait for my news. Just come back and complete your quest." Solitaire laughed. The scout at the front kept reporting the coordinates of the ultimate class 3. Seeing that they were getting closer, Solitaire split his people into 3 teams, one on the left, one on the right, and one in the middle. They fanned out from 3 different directions. Solitaire, who was in the middle, could already see their opponents coming. The ultimate class 3 marched in unison. From time to time, they would shout their commands and kick up a cloud of dust. That was the signal that they were coming. "Get ready, get ready." Solitaire hid in the middle of the team, letting the brothers that the opponents didn't know take the lead. They all approached the ultimate class 3 team as if nothing had happened. "Find Qianli drunk first. Archers, get ready. We'll kill him instantly," Solitaire commanded. In fact, he was at a loss. He felt that there were countless ways to deal with a mage like this. For example, if a few archers fired homing arrows at the same time, how could he escape? How did this guy get to where he was now? This question was too profound. The archers hid deep in the formation. They knocked their arrows and stared at the students with eagle eyes, searching for a target. Black robes and dark purple longswords. This was the attire of Qianli drunk. But no matter how they looked, there was no one dressed like this in the team. They were all dressed in rags and had children's faces. A bunch of children and an adult. Where was the adult when there were a bunch of children? "No target, no target," the archers reported. Priests didn't have eagle eyes, so Solitaire couldn't see clearly. When he heard this report, he wondered if he had found the wrong person. He led the team forward for a while and came face to face with the ultimate class 3. Solitaire was sure that he hadn't found the wrong person. This formation was familiar, some of the faces were familiar, and to them, he also looked familiar. A few of them were looking at him with beaming eyes. "Fuck, we've been tricked." Solitaire suddenly came to a realization. He looked carefully at the other side's formation. Indeed, the captured bandit leader wasn't there. The other side had already predicted that they would come back. They had used a large group to attract their attention. 2 or 3 people had taken the bandit leader in another direction. "The target isn't here," Solitaire hurriedly shouted in the mercenary channel. The players who had been in charge of spying had finished their mission and were rushing in this direction. They all wanted to see the glory of this mage being killed instantly. "Hurry toward the city gates. Send people to all 4 gates. There are about 2 or 3 targets. They're escorting the bandit leader," Solitaire shouted. Solitude under the moonlight shouted. At the same time, he also sent a private message to the people from the small guild, telling them to send out some people and quickly find traces of Thousand Miles Drunk's group. The students smiled and swayed in front of Solitaire. Teacher has a message for you. Teacher? Qianli drunk? Solitaire was a little confused. Teacher said that we'll meet in the competition, so we'll meet again in the competition. Fuck. Solitaire was short of breath. He looked at the group of children in front of him and really wanted to slaughter them all. Chapter 239. It was A.F.A. who was talking to Monologue under the moon proudly. Kids didn't have the modesty and caution of adults. They were very pleased with themselves, and Monologue was very annoyed. However, Monologue still had to care about their identities. They were a mercenary group, not a guild. The guild might be able to establish its prestige by engaging in the act of deceiving both men and women. Mercenary groups were open to doing business. Aside from displaying their strength, they also needed to have a bright and positive image. Only then would they be liked by others, and their business would flourish. It seemed like the other party knew this, which was why they dared to let these low-level players act as bait. Help me tell him that I won't leave until I see you. Monologue gritted his teeth as he said this with a smile. Alright, bye-bye. A.F.A. waved his hand at Soliloquy under the moon. The students left happily. Who would line up now that their teacher wasn't around? It was instantly a mess. The reason they lined up so neatly was just to label themselves and make it easier for the enemy to recognize them. Everything was just bait. Monologue watched as the kids left, and the staff in his hand was almost twisted into a fried dough twist. His companions understood his intentions and came up to express their condolences. It's not the end yet, don't be in a hurry to give up. The other party took a long detour, so they probably won't enter the city so soon. We can still make it if we hurry to the city gate, someone suggested. Yes, you're right. While Moonlight Solitaire reorganized his troops, he also explained the situation to the people from the smaller guilds. He also emphasized that the other party had split up into two groups, and that a group of weak kids was returning to the North Gate. Monologue was still a little despicable. He was worried about the reputation of the mercenary group, so he couldn't take it out on those kids. He hoped that the people from the small guild would take it out on those kids when they received the news, so he emphasized that they were a bunch of extremely weak people. Unfortunately, there weren't many people with despicable thoughts in this world. The people from the small guild had no intention of taking it out on them. They only expressed their endless regret for falling for the other party's trick. In the end, they asked weakly, is there still a chance of completing the mission? Fuck, what a bunch of losers. Solitude under the moonlight scoffed in his heart, but he still replied, we'll try our best. He sent people to rush to several city gates, and at the same time, he called for help from the mercenary group. However, it was the peak period of the game at night. Most of the people in the team were in the middle of a quest. Most of the people who could come had already arrived. This call really didn't get any more people. On the other hand, he didn't manage to clean up Qianli's drunkenness, which caused a wave of discussion in the mercenary group's channel. Is there a situation at North Gate? Did East Gate find anything? Shiman, what about your side? Soliloquy under the moonlight kept calling out. No. The people who were rushing in 3 different directions responded as they hurried along. Speed was important in war. At this moment, all 3 directions were filled with speed-type classes. Those like Soliloquy who moved slowly were left behind. At this moment, Solitary Moonlight was feeling a little apprehensive. Their side only had around 20 people. They had mobilized their speed-type classes and split them into 3 groups. Although half of the 20 or so people on their side were speed-type classes, after splitting them up, there were only 3 or 4 people on each side. They still weren't a match for 8,000 Miles Drunk. Solitary Moonlight didn't dare to come to a conclusion lightly. Everyone be careful. Soliloquy could only remind them like this. Don't worry. So many people can't take care of him? Players who hadn't fought against Gu Fei before couldn't imagine how strong Gu Fei was. This was because they could only analyze Gu Fei's strength from the perspective of a normal game. No matter how high his magic damage was, he was still a mage, right? With low mana and a slow cast time, this was a major flaw. This character should be protected in a team, not a solo duel. He's also very good at close combat. Everyone, don't be careless, Soliloquy said with lingering fear. Really? Then we'd like to see it for ourselves. Everyone's disapproving attitude made Soliloquy a bit anxious. He couldn't explain how good Gu Fei was at close combat. He had a bad feeling, but he could only say a few weak warnings like, be careful. Relax, relax. Everyone was annoyed by Soliloquy's nagging. The east gate is in place. I didn't find it. The west gate is in place. I didn't find it. The south gate is in place. I didn't find it. If they went around the city, the south gate would be the furthest. However, there was no need for that. They went through the north gate and reached the south gate. The distance between them and the east and west gates wasn't much different. The three directions were in place. They hadn't found anything along the way, so they could only wait. On the west gate side, 2 thieves and 2 archers quickly rushed over. When they reached the gate, the 2 thieves immediately went into stealth. One of the archers was a sharpshooter, while the other was a lurker. The lurker had the trap skill, so he secretly set up a trap outside the door. Actually, setting up traps inside the door was the only way to go, but this guy's trap level was still low, and the traps he set up were very eye-catching. Behind the door was a stone path. Only an idiot would step on it if someone threw a big clip on it. Outside the door, it's slightly better. My skill level isn't enough to hide the traps, so I can manually operate it. The spy dug a small pit outside the door and placed the trap clip inside. Then, he carefully scattered some soil to cover it up. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't be able to see it. As soon as he was done, the sharpshooter with the eagle eyes gave him a push. At the same time, he called out to the 2 thieves, "That seems to be it." The lurker looked up and immediately cursed, "Fuck." At the base of the city wall of Cloud City, someone was flying over while sticking close to the wall. The one in front was wearing a black mage robe, and his appearance was very similar to the legendary Qianli. What made the lurker feel unbalanced was that he had set up the trap outside the door. Now that Gu Fei and the others were coming from the base of the wall, they would turn right after entering the door. How could they run to the center and step on his trap? The lurker wasn't willing to let his ingenious man-made trap go to waste, so he pitifully discussed with the 3 people, should we lure it over and let him step on it? People who played online games all liked to show off their skills, especially if they had something that others didn't. In the end, the 3 people were unmoved and said indifferently, "It depends. How about the thieves go first? Since he's coming over, we'll just stab him." There was still some distance between Gu Fei and the others, so they hurriedly discussed their strategy. Unfortunately, Solitude Under the Moon sent another message. "Thieves, be careful. That guy might have anti-stealth equipment." Although Gu Fei had said that he had such equipment, there was clearly a thief in stealth that he hadn't discovered. Soliloquy Beneath the Moon had no choice but to believe that it was true rather than not. Only then did the 4 people realize that they had discovered that Gu Fei and the others hadn't had time to report to their superiors, so they hurriedly spoke first. And if Gu Fei had anti-stealth, the previous strategy obviously couldn't be used. Should we use a trap? The lurker became lively again. He's a mage. Is there a need for him to rush over? Gu Fei was almost there, but they were still arguing. Who knows? Aya, he's coming. Quick, get into position. Even though Gu Fei had anti-stealth, the 2 thieves still maintained their stealth. The 4 of them retreated to the back of the trap, glaring at Gu Fei like tigers watching their prey. Gu Fei ran over from afar and saw that there were people acting suspiciously at the west gate. He guessed that it was very likely that they were the people who were after them. He secretly sighed in his heart. The people behind Gu Fei who were responsible for carrying the bandit leader had changed from the 2 slow-moving warriors to the thieves. However, their movements weren't much faster. After all, carrying a person was also a burden. If the bandit leader wanted him to walk by himself, he would really walk. He wouldn't run even a single step. When they got closer, Gu Fei also discovered that there weren't only 2 archers. There were also 2 thieves in stealth. They were also paying attention to him, so he was even more certain of their intentions. And looking at the eyes of the 2 archers, they didn't seem to be trying to hide this. Gu Fei smiled and turned to the 2 students. "You guys walk slowly." After saying this, he sprinted forward with all his might. His speed rapidly soared, and he suddenly closed in on the 4 people by a few meters. "Look, he's rushing over." The lurker was extremely excited. "Retreat! Don't let him step into the trap." The 3 people obeyed his order and each took 2 steps back. The 2 archers knocked their arrows and aimed at Gu Fei, ready to shoot. However, the lurker's mind was in turmoil. He was waiting for Gu Fei to step into the hole in the ground. Whoosh whoosh. The 2 arrows shot out at the same time. However, at the same time, Gu Fei suddenly appeared in front of the 4 people, and the arrow went behind him. "Aya, it's teleportation. I forgot." The lurker shouted in annoyance. The 2 thieves hurriedly pincer attacked Gu Fei from the left and right. Dual flame flash. Gu Fei roared. This time, he was a bit too close to the 4 people. He was so close that he couldn't swing his sword. But with Gu Fei's skills, how could he be stumped by such a small problem? He flipped his right hand and held his sword in a reverse grip. At the same time, his body began to spin from right to left. A fire dragon shot out from Gu Fei's body. After turning 180 degrees, 4 white lights shone brightly behind Gu Fei. Gu Fei's right hand smoothly inserted the sword back into his pocket. He waved to the 2 students. "Quick, continue forward." This dual flame flash is pretty good when I'm too close to my opponent." Gu Fei thought to himself. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.